Hey guys, tonight, you and I are going on a long quiet journey, a gentle walk if you will, through time. We're going to find out what school was really like 1,000 years ago, across distant lands, behind ancient walls, through incense-laced corridors, beside oil lamps and parchment scrolls. We'll explore monastic classrooms in foggy medieval Europe, drift across the desert sands to the buzzing heart of Islamic scholarship, and stroll beneath paper lanterns glowing in the courtyards of Confucian academies in Song Dynasty China. But first, before we begin, leave a comment. Where are you listening from? What time is it for you right now? I'd love to know. It brings me a quiet sort of joy to imagine all of us, spread across the world, gathering together in this one soft moment in time. Now, settle in. Get cozy. Let your body grow heavy, like an old book gently closing. Wrap yourself in blankets. Maybe dim the light, or turn it off altogether. Let the world around you become quiet. Let your thoughts loosen, like leaves drifting down a stream. And let's begin. You open your eyes to the sound of bells, slow and distant, muffled by thick morning fog. You're in the early 11th century. The year is 1025. Your feet are bare against the cold stone floor of a monastery, somewhere in the heart of Francia, what we'd now call northern France. The walls are ancient, the stones heavy with stories whispered for centuries. Moss climbs the base of the outer chapel, and ivy creeps along the side of the dormitory hall. You live here now, with the monks. You're not quite a monk yourself, not yet, but a student in training, one of the oblates. Outside, the monastery is waking slowly. The sun has yet to rise. Its golden breath lingers behind the hills, painting the clouds with a hue of faded apricot. A candle flickers gently in your chamber. Its little flame dances in rhythm with the soft rhythmic chanting of lords drifting down the corridor. Morning prayers echoing off ancient walls. You sit up on your straw-stuffed mattress, wrap yourself in your coarse woolen robe, and whisper a prayer under your breath, though you're not entirely sure who you're whispering to. The others, older boys, some already scribes, are already gone, probably at the chapel. You hurry, pulling on your rough sandals, the leather still stiff. The air is sharp. It smells faintly of damp stone, of wax, and of old parchment. Down the corridor and through a wooden arch you step into the chapel, where flickering light from candles glows against the stone columns. The voices of the monks are slow, steady, almost like a lullaby. They chant in Latin, and though you don't yet understand all the words, the cadence soothes you. After prayers there is breakfast, if you can call it that. A thin gruel, sometimes with a little barley, and always silent. Meals here are eaten in stillness. A single monk reads aloud from a text while the others listen, chew and swallow in thoughtful quiet. There is comfort in that rhythm, in the shared silence, in the routine that never changes. You clean your wooden bowl, place it back in the alcove, and make your way to the scriptorium. This is where your real day begins. The scriptorium is a low, quiet room, its high, narrow windows letting in only slivers of light. Candles are always burning, even during daylight. You take your seat at a small desk, and before you, a board covered with parchment and ink pots, styluses, and small knives for trimming quills. You're not here to write yet, not for a long time. For now, you listen. A gentle voice begins to speak, your magister, or master. His tone is slow, almost dreamy. He reads aloud in Latin, explaining bit by bit what each sentence means. The texts are old, mostly scripture, but sometimes the writings of St. Augustine or Boethius. Once, you heard him mention Cicero, though no one here has a copy of anything by Cicero. It's too far, too expensive, too dangerous to travel and get one. Books here are like relics, holy things copied by hand and guarded for generations. There is no paper here. Everything is written on vellum scraped sheepskin. Sometimes, if you look close enough, you can see the faint trace of hair left on the page. You learn by listening, repetition, memorization, and silence. Outside, the world is raw and uncertain. Kings and lords feud over territory, roads are often unsafe, the weather cruel and unpredictable. But here, within these stone walls, knowledge is preserved like sacred flame. You're a tiny part of that, a flicker of it. By mid-morning, you're practicing your Latin declensions, murmuring them softly under your breath. You don't understand grammar yet, not the way we think of it now, but you are internalizing it line by line. You copy letters onto a wax tablet with a stylus, then wipe them away with the flat end and begin again, over and over. Hours pass like this. The candle beside you is burned down a full inch before you look up again. At noon, the bell rings for sext, the midday prayer. You're grateful to stretch your legs. Your back aches from sitting so still. The chapel is cold again, the light strange and golden now spilling through stained glass. After the prayer there is a little more food, bread and broth, and a walk in the garden courtyard. It's there, sitting quietly on a bench, that you overhear two monks talking softly. One mentions a distant place, Toledo, where scholars gather not to chant but to study. Not just scriptures, but the ancient wisdom of the Greeks, of Aristotle, of Galen. He speaks of the Moors, of books written in Arabic, of stars mapped in intricate charts. His voice is hushed, reverent, as if speaking of a holy land. You don't know it yet, but one day your journey will take you there, to the lands of sun and sand and domes etched with calligraphy. But for now, your eyes grow heavy, your arms rest in your lap, and the last sound you hear before drifting off is the toll of the bell once more, singing its slow, ancient song through the fog. You open your eyes, and the light is different. This sun is sharper, brighter, more ancient. You're no longer in the cold green hills of Francia. You're in Cordoba. The year is still 1025. The city stretches before you like a dream made of dust and music. The roofs are flat and whitewashed, the alleys shaded with sheets of linen hung between the buildings, and the air smells of warm bread, orange blossom and ink. You're a student again, but now in Al-Andalus, in the western lands of the Islamic world. This is a place that glows with learning. You walk through the bustling streets, the soft slap of sandals on sun-baked stone beneath your feet. People speak many languages here: Arabic, Berber, Latin, Hebrew. The sounds swirl around you like wind in a palm grove. You're headed toward a madrasa, one of the many small schools nestled in the courtyards of mosques, libraries or scholars' homes. Education here flows more freely than in the monastery. It's not confined to one stone building. It lives wherever people gather to seek truth. As you approach, you pass a bookseller's stall, and your breath catches. There must be hundreds of manuscripts on display, stacked in neat pyramids, or hanging from the walls on wooden rods. Some are wrapped in red or green leather, some are dyed indigo, a few are still being copied by hand by scribes, their heads bowed in quiet concentration. The smell of ink, frankincense and goatskin parchment is thick in the air. In your monastery there were perhaps 30 books in total, but here there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands in this city alone. Cordoba is said to have 70 libraries. The Caliph once owned a private collection with over 400,000 volumes, and even the smallest mosque school may have dozens. You buy a single sheet of paper, real paper, not vellum, from a trader with gold rings in his beard. He smiles at you and throws in a small stub of reed pen. "Write something beautiful," he says. His voice is soft, like it's carrying a secret. You tuck the page into your satchel and step into the shaded courtyard of the madrasa. Your teacher, a gentle, middle-aged man with a narrow, patient face and a long woolen robe, sits cross-legged on a woven mat. Around him, a dozen students just like you gather in a circle, also seated, with writing boards or slates in their laps. There is no blackboard here, no desk, no ruler tapping against a book, only words and air and listening. The teacher begins to speak. His Arabic is clear and smooth, his voice steady and low. Today's lesson is part theology, part logic. He reads a passage from Al-Farabi, the great philosopher, and then discusses its connection to Aristotle. You don't understand everything, not yet, but your ears grow used to the rhythm of the argument. You hear terms like AQL, intellect and ELM knowledge. You learn that learning itself is an act of devotion, that knowledge is not just for the rich or the cloistered, it is for the ummah, the community. And so scholars here, ulama, carry great respect. They are not just teachers, they are guides. Midway through the day, your class moves under a nearby fig tree. Someone pours mint water into a clay jug. The shade is cool and welcome. A debate begins between two older students. One insists that reason must follow scripture. The other claims that reason is a tool to understand scripture. The teacher lets them go on, nodding slowly, occasionally interjecting with a calm question. This is part of the lesson. You realise this is not just school, it is something softer and deeper, a way of thinking, a way of listening, a kind of slow, lifelong unfolding. By evening, the sky is bruised with colour. The call to prayer spirals through the streets, rising above the flat rooftops like a thread of gold. You sit quietly on the edge of the fountain in the school courtyard, dipping your fingers in the water. A boy next to you recites a line of poetry in Persian, just to himself. It's about the moon. You look up. There it is, cold and perfect, rising above the domes and palms, and in your satchel, a folded piece of paper waits. You don't yet know what you'll write on it. A name, a verse, a question. But you know you will write something, because you are a student, and this is the world of 1,000 years ago. And now, as the night settles over Cordoba like velvet, your breath slows, the sound of sandals fades, and your mind grows quiet. You stay in Al-Andalus for some time, long enough for the rhythm of the days to settle into you, long enough to stop thinking of where you came from, long enough for Arabic to feel natural in your mouth, though still foreign in your throat. Your teacher notices your curiosity, your questions, your hunger for books, and one morning, long before the sun has risen over the tiled roofs and date palms, he gives you a folded slip of parchment and says only one word: Baghdad. You fold it into your satchel and leave not long after, joining a caravan heading eastward, across miles and months of shifting desert. The journey is long and slow, but each day brings a new accent, a new kind of bread, a new idea. One scholar in the caravan teaches you the rudiments of Persian poetry as the camels groan beneath the moonlight. Another recites stories from Indian mathematics, of zero and infinity, and algorithms you can barely understand. There are nights spent huddled against stone ruins, days spent under silk tents in merchant cities whose names you do not yet know how to spell. And finally, one morning, Baghdad appears, not rising out of the sand as a city might in a story, but gradually, like something always half seen. First come the outer fields, the aqueducts, the palm groves, the lazy coils of the Tigris, then the outer gates shaped like towers in a dream, then the city itself vast and living, with libraries taller than houses and minarets that rise like fingers into the pale sky. You stay first in a student hostel on the western bank of the river, eating lentils and rice with dozens of others, students from across the caliphate, some from as far as Khorasan or Bukhara. They all speak Arabic, but with different melodies. In the early mornings the streets are still and cool, and the scent of jasmine mingles with the dust and ink. On your second day, you cross the bridge to the eastern quarter, and follow the directions written on the slip of parchment until you find the place you've come to see, Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. It's not a school in the way you knew in the monastery, nor like the madrasa in Cordoba. It's something looser, stranger, more alive. It is part library, part translation bureau, part school, part observatory. The walls are pale stone, and the door is guarded only by a young man with a ledger, who waves you through once you give your teacher's name. Inside it is quiet but not silent. There are voices, low, focused, insistent. Scholars sit at long tables copying Greek manuscripts into Arabic, translating Plato, Galen, Euclid. Others discuss the alignment of the planets with the calm intensity of people who live more in the stars than on the ground. You are given a place to sit and a scroll to study, Ptolemy, in Arabic script. You trace the words slowly, sounding them out, understanding perhaps 1 in 10. But it doesn't matter. You are here. You're shown the observatory, a wide rooftop platform with brass instruments like skeletons of unknown animals. A man in a white robe explains the use of the astrolabe and hands you one to hold. The metal is cool in your palm. You ask him what the stars can teach, and he answers, "If you learn to observe without guessing, they will teach you how to think." At night, you sleep among the shelves, wrapped in a blanket beneath towering stacks of papyrus and bound books wrapped in leather. No one wakes you. No one asks what you're doing. You suspect many others are doing the same. You begin to attend lectures in small groups, sometimes under a canopy in the garden, sometimes inside crowded rooms filled with dust and light. You listen to mathematicians debate the infinity of numbers, philosophers argue over Aristotle's metaphysics, physicians explain the movement of blood and the treatment of melancholy. The method is more open here. There is no punishment for wrong answers, only a kind of quiet disappointment from your peers and a challenge to think better next time. You begin writing in Arabic, copying texts in a neat, slanted hand. Your fingers grow stained with ink, and your eyes soar from the strain of candlelight. One morning, a scholar invites you to help translate a short treatise from Syriac. You don't know the language, but he smiles and says, "Then you'll learn it." And so you do. Slowly, imperfectly, because that's the rhythm of this place. No one ever finishes learning here. They only move deeper into the labyrinth. Some of your fellow students sleep barely 4 hours a night, pacing under the moonlight reciting formulas aloud. Others spend days searching for a single book rumoured to be held in a private collection. There is a hunger in the air, but not a frantic one. It is patient, old, relentless. The hunger of people who believe knowledge is something sacred, like water in the desert. You realise something, weeks in. There are no grades here, no official certificates, no tests carved in stone. Learning is not for proving, it is for becoming. When someone is ready, they teach. That is the measure. You begin copying a manuscript for a scholar headed to Basra. You write slowly, deliberately, as though your words might shape the world. Each letter matters, each margin is sacred. And one day, while looking for a lost scroll, you find a copy of a text you once heard spoken aloud in your monastery. A line from Augustine, translated now into Arabic, full circle. The thought makes your heart slow in your chest. This is a different world from where you began, and yet, somehow, the same. People here, like there, still ask the same questions. What is truth? How do we know? What must we do? You stay in Baghdad until the days become indistinguishable from one another, until you dream in Arabic and speak in half-formed quotes. And then, one day, a letter arrives. A seal in wax. A simple note. A scholar you once met in Cordoba is now in Nishapur. He writes, "Come, there is something you must see." You pack your satchel again, slower this time. You say goodbye to the House of Wisdom and step back into the dust and sun. The east waits, and you are ready. Shall I continue with part 4, your journey into Persia and the rise of the madrasas under the Seljuks, where learning begins to shift from fluid circles to formal institutions? The road to Nishapur cuts through quiet heat, yellow plains, and long ribbons of grey-green trees that line the rivers. You travel slower than before. You're older now, though not in years, only in silence, in the way you notice things, the way light falls on parchment, the way arguments carry in a crowded courtyard, the way a student's eyes change when they finally understand something. You ride with a caravan of scholars and students, some young, some impossibly old, all drifting eastward, pulled like iron filings toward a centre they have not yet seen. At night, you sleep beneath rustling poplars and eat from a shared pot of chickpeas and cracked wheat. No one speaks much. The wind does enough talking. When you arrive in Nishapur, it's spring, and the orchards are white with blossoms. The air is full of bees, and somewhere behind the hills the snow is still melting. The city is calmer than Baghdad, softer, quieter, less a centre, more a retreat. But still, it breathes scholarship in and out. You're directed to a large courtyard surrounded by arched walkways. It is the Nizamiya, one of the first great madrasas built under the patronage of the Seljuk vizier Nizam al-Mulk. The name carries weight. It echoes. It is a school, yes, but also a statement, a claim that the state will now shape the future of learning. Inside, the mood is more structured than anything you've known before. The curriculum is formal: grammar, law, logic, theology, rhetoric. You attend your first lesson seated cross-legged among 30 students, all facing the mudaris, the head teacher, who sits upon a small dais with a low table before him, and his notes laid carefully in inked bundles. He does not speak freely or wander down philosophical paths. His voice is deliberate, measured. He is not here to explore. He is here to train. Each day begins with the Quran, its rhythm familiar now, anchoring the rest of the discourse. Then come the law texts, fiqh, dense, specific, filled with scenarios and arguments, branching into endless qualifications. You find your mind tested not by beauty, but by exactitude. Each rule spawns another. Each answer breeds exceptions. The purpose is not to memorize, though you do plenty of that. The purpose is to learn how to argue, with clarity, with precision, with obedience to tradition and confidence in method. You keep your notes on wooden boards and clean them each night, scraping away the old with river water and a flat stone, making space for more. This is how most students work. Paper is too costly, books too rare. You memorize by erasing. Unlike the open, fluid world of Baghdad, here the structure is clear. There is a curriculum. There are positions to earn, degrees to hold. There is even a stipend for the most promising students provided by the state. The madrasa is no longer just a place for seekers. It is a system, and you are inside it. Still, not everything is rigid. After formal lessons, the students break into smaller study circles under the porticos. They debate rulings, whisper verses of poetry, test each other with legal hypotheticals. Some leave to study with independent teachers who operate from their homes, older men with long beards and no official titles, who teach because they must. They trust fewer books. They expect more silence. You visit one of them one evening, bringing dates and a humble introduction. He says little, but lets you sit and listen as he dissects a passage from Al-Ghazali, line by line, pausing often to look at nothing. You begin to understand that in this part of the world the shape of education is changing. The madrasas are multiplying. In Herat Ray, Isfahan, more are being built. The rulers are investing in them, not just for piety, but for control. These schools will produce judges, bureaucrats, clerics, theologians. The scholars of the future will not be lone mystics or wandering philosophers. They will be men of law. And that means students like you must learn not only to seek truth, but to defend it, to cite it, to formalize it, to wield it. Your teacher, the one who summoned you here, is older than you remembered. His beard is mostly white now, his hands thinner, though his eyes still hold something sharp. You ask him why he called you. He tells you to sit and listen. Then he speaks of the past, of how he once studied in the House of Wisdom, of the freedom they had, the long arguments under the stars, the nights spent copying books by candlelight just for the joy of it. He says it's different now, not worse, just different. The world is changing. So is knowledge. It always does. You study with him in private for weeks. He gives you texts to read, questions to ask, but more than that, he teaches you how to carry yourself. Not just how to know, but how to appear to know. How to move through the growing web of institutional learning with dignity, curiosity, and care. He tells you that the madrasa is a garden, and you must decide whether you want to tend it or just walk through it. One morning, after a rain, he hands you a folded piece of paper. You've seen the West, he says. You've seen the centre. Now go see the Far East. The page has a single name on it, Luoyang. You blink. You've heard the name before, in poetry, in whispered stories, from travellers in Baghdad. But it's so far, so faint on the maps. There's a man there, he says, a teacher of the classics. They say he has memorised the Analects and can recite them backward. He doesn't speak Arabic. He's never seen the Tigris, but he teaches as we do. Not the same words, but the same hunger. You fold the note, thank him, and step out into the orchard. The blossoms are beginning to fall. The road into China is longer than you imagined. It begins not with a step, but with a withdrawal. From the world you thought you knew, from the comfortable patterns of Arabic and the rhythms of Islamic law. You travel northeast, passing first through Khorasan, where the days are dry and golden and the mountains stand like sleeping giants, then through Transoxiana, where the air grows thinner and the wind sharper. Along the way, you stay in caravanserais filled with smoke and shouting, where merchants speak Turkic, Sogdian, or Mongolic tongues. You trade lessons in grammar for bread, or stories from Baghdad for a blanket. A scholar in Samarkand teaches you how to tie a winter robe properly, how to bow to a host, how to listen when you cannot yet understand. When asked where you are from, you answer with a shrug. From the west, you say, from the road. After months of crossing rivers that flow like veins through steppe and mountain, you reach the outer cities of the Song dynasty. The walls are smooth and pale. The guards speak in clipped syllables. You are nobody here, not a student, not a traveller, just another foreign face arriving too late, with too little, and nothing to trade but questions. But questions are still worth something. You find a translator, a middle-aged man with ink-stained hands, who agrees to help you in exchange for an hour of Arabic poetry each night. You begin to learn Chinese slowly, as if climbing wet stone. Each character is a maze, each tone a tightrope. Yet you persist, because you must. Because something waits behind the veil of words and you want to reach it. In Luoyang, you are directed to the Guozijian. the Imperial Academy. It sits in the shadow of a tall hill, flanked by rows of ginkgo trees and a narrow stream where boys wash their brushes. Unlike the madrasas or the libraries of Baghdad, the academy does not hum with debate or smell of ink. It is quieter here, more restrained. There is ceremony in everything. The way students bow to the stone stele at the gate, the way they fold their hands when they speak, the way every scroll is unrolled with the precision of ritual. You are granted entry not as a student, but as a guest observer, an outsider who watches but does not disturb. Your first days are filled with silence. You watch boys recite lines from the Analects in unison, their voices rising and falling like waves. Their teacher, a thin man with eyebrows like calligraphy strokes, walks among them correcting posture more often than pronunciation. You ask your translator what they are saying. He whispers, "To learn and to practice what is learned. Is this not joy?" It is not joy in the way you knew it in Baghdad. It is not fire or chaos or midnight arguments over metaphysics. It is discipline. It is form. Here, education is about virtue, not just knowledge. To study is to become correct, not simply to know what is right, but to be right, in thought, in conduct, in intention. The students study the 4 books, the 5 classics, and the rites of the Joe. They memorize long lists, trace characters hundreds of times, compose essays in response to moral dilemmas. Each answer must reflect not just reason, but order, harmony. There are no open questions here. There is no room for wild speculation or philosophical doubt. Doubt is considered dangerous, even impolite. You wonder at first how they learn like this, so enclosed, so careful. But then you begin to see it, in the quiet, in the way their writing grows straighter each day, in the way they speak to their elders without hesitation, without fear. They are building something solid, not just in their minds, but in their character. You were invited one morning to observe the teacher you had heard about, the man who supposedly knew the Analects backward. He is old, almost invisible behind the folds of his robe, and he speaks so softly that the students lean forward just to catch his breath. He tells stories, not in his own words, but through quotation. A parable of Confucius, an episode from Mencius, a line of poetry from Du Fu. You catch only fragments, but each one lands like a bell rung in an empty hall. You write them down, then copy them again, not because you fully understand, but because they feel true. You begin to sense that here, truth is not a spark. It is a stone, shaped, polished, set. You grow quieter yourself. You wake earlier, sweep the courtyard with the others, bow before the text. You practice calligraphy, your fingers stiff from holding the brush. Your Arabic ink strokes become slower, more deliberate. You begin to dream in strange shapes, and hear your name called in tones you still cannot reproduce. But even here, amid strict tradition, change is stirring. You hear whispers of new scholars, Jushi for instance, who are reinterpreting the classics, introducing layers of logic and cosmic theory, marrying the ancient with the modern. Some teachers embrace it, others scoff. But the conversation is beginning to shift, not loudly, not with fire, just enough to rustle the leaves. One day, after a long morning of copying passages from the Book of Rites, your translator brings you a sealed message. A letter. You recognize the seal. It is from Nishapur, but the handwriting is not your teacher's. It is shakier, rougher. You unfold it beneath a plum tree and read only one line. Return west. You are needed. You do not hesitate. You gather your notes, your scrolls, your brush and board. You bow deeply before the academy gate. You leave in silence. But you carry something with you, a different kind of learning, quiet, inward, strong. A sense that education is not only what you know, it is how you stand, how you breathe, how you wait. You cross back slowly, one silence into another, retracing half-forgotten paths, carrying your bundled notes and borrowed memories over mountain and dust. The languages shift beneath your feet. What was once crisp and tonal now becomes guttural again, familiar and heavy like old wool. And though the east fades behind you, its rhythms linger. You bow slightly to elders without thinking. You unroll texts with care. You walk a little straighter. When the merchants ask what you studied, you answer only, how to sit still. The call to return west is not urgent, not even specific, but it is clear. The world is moving again, and you have to follow. You pass back through Nishapur, but the orchard is gone. The madrasa is quieter. Your old teacher has died. They say he passed away mid-verse, reciting a line from Mutanabi with his eyes half closed, as if nodding to some joke only he could hear. The young scholars there now do not remember you, and you do not try to explain. You move on, west again, across Persia, through Baghdad, where the libraries still breathe but more cautiously now, under new rulers and new fears. It is not what it was. But then again, nothing ever is. In Damascus you find a ship. It creaks under the weight of olive oil and wool. The sailors are loud and cheerful. One of them gives you a salted plum and asks if you've heard of the new schools rising in the lands of the Franks. They study, he says, in cathedrals now. The priests teach them. Strange ideas. Latin, not Arabic. But books still. Always books. The crossing is long. You spend it half ill and mostly alone, reading your own marginalia by moonlight. The deck sways beneath you like a breath held too long, and the stars change places every night. When you finally disembark in a small port town on the southern edge of France, the cold hits you like a gate closing. The streets are narrow and damp, the language is rough and full of slurred edges. But there is learning here too, different, patchy, uncertain, but growing. The first places of learning you find are cloisters, monasteries tucked in valleys and on hilltops, where bells ring before dawn and candles flicker behind narrow windows. Here, the students wear habits and keep their heads shaved. They speak Latin, slowly and carefully, and spend most of their hours copying. The scriptorium is silent except for the scratch of quills and the rustle of vellum. A Benedictine monk shows you his collection, mostly sermons, some commentaries, one manuscript of Boethius nearly worn through at the spine. He lets you hold it like one might hold a dying bird. "We lost so much," he says quietly. "So much we didn't even know we had." You stay there for weeks, sleeping in a stone cell, waking to chant with the others. You help in the gardens, tend bees, copy margins, mix ink from oak galls. It is a different kind of learning. Slow, devotional, sealed off from the outside world. No students here argue or question. They learn by copying, by obedience, by absorption. But even here, you see sparks. A younger monk confesses that he is trying to translate Aristotle. He whispers it to you as if it were a sin. There are rumours, he says, that in Paris they are reading him out loud. Not in Greek, not even in Latin, but in commentaries, Arabic ones, from Cordoba or Toledo, with diagrams, with logic. So you head north. Paris is colder, louder, full of smoke and shouting. The streets churn with students, boys barely out of adolescence, with patched cloaks and ink-stained fingers, some barefoot, all hungry. They chant lessons as they walk, argue in alleys, rehearse Latin declensions like songs. You follow one group into a cathedral courtyard, where a friar is lecturing on grammar. There is no building, just a circle of students and a voice. The friar speaks in Latin, gesturing with a stick. The students answer in turn. The method is old, recitation, repetition. But something feels different here, urgent, like they are trying to catch up to something, or remember something they never quite learned. Later, you're invited into a more formal setting. A scholar, small but structured. The subject is logic. The teacher, a thin man with eyes like iron nails, quotes Boethius, then adds, as Avicenna argues. You blink. The name crosses the continents like a rope pulled tight. The students do not flinch. They know who he is. They've read fragments, translations, misunderstood versions. But still, his name is alive here. So is Averroes. So is Maimonides. You hear Arabic philosophy bleeding into Latin discourse, reshaped and sometimes mistranslated, but passed from one world into another, like fire carried in cupped hands. The students study 7 subjects: grammar, rhetoric, logic, the trivium, followed by arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music, the quadrivium. The structure is clear, the ambitions less so. Some want to become priests, some scribes. A few perhaps dream of something more: understanding, truth, mastery. But mostly they are poor, cold, tired, and stubborn, and they study anyway. You begin to see it now, the larger shape, the thread that ties Baghdad to Loyang to Paris. It is not the curriculum, it is not the architecture, it is the persistence, the hunger, the idea that knowledge is worth sitting still for, worth copying by candlelight. worth arguing over for hours, worth carrying over deserts and oceans. It survives not in institutions, but in hands, in the way one student leans closer to hear, or straightens his back when he recites, or weeps silently after failing to understand a single line. You spend your last days in Paris in a drafty stone hall, watching a public debate. Two students take turns arguing whether the soul is separable from the body. They quote Aristotle, Augustine, and some garbled version of Al-Farabi. The audience murmurs, the master nods, the bell tolls. The debate ends with no answer, but they are smiling. In the quiet afterward, a boy asks you, "What did they teach where you came from?" You think for a long time. Everything, you say, but mostly how to ask. The sea that takes you to the edges of Europe is grey and slow and heavy. It moves like thought before language. The sailors are quiet. Even the wind seems reluctant. You ride northward, skimming the coasts of Normandy and then Brittany, before crossing into colder waters. The sky is rarely clear. The waves slap the sides of the boat like an argument with no end. You sleep beneath a damp blanket, breathing in salt and mildew, and try to keep your notes dry. You dream of Arabic verse spoken in Latin, of Confucian sages wandering among ruins, of a teacher's ink-stained hands lifting a scroll toward candlelight. Everything is blending now, as if all the schools you've known are reflections in the same shifting pool. When land finally rises again, it's not dramatic. Just a line of dark cliffs under low clouds. You arrive at the western coast of Ireland, where the air is filled with gulls and peat smoke, and the strange tang of moss-covered stone. The local dialect is impenetrable, but a monk at the harbour greets you in Latin, stiff and careful, as if he's unrolling an old grammar book just to speak. He offers shelter. You accept. The monastery lies inland, atop a hill carved by wind. The buildings are stone, low and solid, their roofs layered in turf. Everything here is grey, green and wet, and yet inside the air smells of honeyed wax and wool. You're given a cell no larger than a cupboard, a woolen robe, a loaf of brown bread. The abbot says nothing to you for 3 days. Then he leads you to the scriptorium and points to a stool. Here, education is not declared. It is endured. There are no lectures, no debates, no bustling student chatter. Only the slow, measured rhythm of copying. The monks sit at long wooden tables, each bent over a page of vellum, each working with meticulous calm. You're given a simple psalter and a quill. You practice strokes, uncials, half-uncials, insular script. The letters curve like vines. The margins bloom with illumination, gold leaf, birds, Celtic knots that loop like the thoughts of someone who has lived too long without speaking. The Irish monks have preserved texts that no one else in Europe remembered. You see crumbling Latin grammars, Greek fragments, even a faint, careful copy of a Hebrew psalm. They cannot always read what they copy, but they keep the shape alive. They treat each word as holy, not for its meaning, but for its presence. Knowledge here is not about mastery, it's about memory, preservation, a kind of prayer. In the evenings the monks chant, not just liturgy, but genealogies, lines of saints and scholars stretching back centuries. They do not study to learn, they study to remember. You ask one of them what he knows of the outside world. He shrugs. Rome is fallen, he says, but words still rise. That is all. And yet something stirs even in this quiet place. A young monk shows you a manuscript he is compiling, a bestiary, drawn from scraps of older texts, with animals half real and half mythical. He points to the pelican, bleeding from its chest to feed its young. It is like Christ, he says. Then he laughs softly. Or perhaps just a bird. You begin to teach him Arabic letters, just for the shape of them. He practices in the dirt behind the cloister wall. You see him carve a leaf, ba, ta, like seeds planted in stone. One morning a messenger arrives from the east, a tall man with dark eyes and a parchment rolled into a bone tube. The abbot receives him quietly. You are called. The message is brief, but it opens something wide inside you. There are schools forming in Bologna now, in Italy. Not monasteries, not cathedrals, but something new, independent, secular, full of energy. The message is not an invitation, just a note passed from one learner to another. Come see. It's different here. You pack your things. You bow to the monks. The young scribe hands you a folded sheet. his first attempt at an Arabic proverb written in trembling strokes. "You taught me the word for sky," he says. You nod. Then you leave, walking east again, where the sky's beginning to clear, and where knowledge, once locked in cloisters and sung in the dark, is being rewritten in ink under open arches, among students with bare heads and sharp tongues. The road from the Western Isles to Italy winds through kingdoms and ruins, across plains still scarred by old wars and valleys blooming with new trade. The cities you pass are different now, no longer silent fortresses or cloisters set apart from the world, but busy intersections of merchants, pilgrims, craftsmen, and the slow, deliberate pulse of something new, civic life. Towns are rising where none stood before, growing not around cathedrals or castles, but markets and roads. The world, it seems, is no longer satisfied with silence. In the north of Italy, past the soft curve of the Apennines, you arrive in Bologna. It isn't grand. There are no marble forums or palaces of gold, but the city breathes differently. There's a murmur in its streets, not the chants of monks or the shouts of traders, but the low, constant rhythm of students talking. You recognize it instantly. You follow it. They meet in borrowed rooms, in churches by day and rented houses by night. There are no fixed buildings here yet, no carved stones bearing the names of schools. But there is an idea, and that idea is enough to gather dozens, then hundreds, of restless young men with more ink than money and more questions than patience. They come from all corners, Lombardy, Provence, the Rhineland, even England, some walking for weeks just to sit on a cold bench and listen to a man read from a borrowed manuscript. What they come for is law, not the divine law of clerics or the oral traditions of tribes, but Roman law, old, forgotten, and now returning like a ghost into a room long emptied. The Corpus Juris Civilis, compiled under Justinian centuries before, is rediscovered, dusted off, and placed at the centre of something that will change everything, a university. You enter cautiously, uncertain if you are student, visitor, or relic. But Bologna does not ask for credentials, it asks for interest. You offer yours, and in exchange, you are given access. The classes are held in cramped halls, where the windows are too small and the air thick with the sweat of wool and wood smoke. The magister stands with the codex open before him, reading line by line in Latin, pausing often to explain, question, compare. This is the gloss. Around the margins, the students write responses, expansions, interpretations, text upon text layered like stone and moss. They are not merely copying, they are building. The language is formal, the arguments intricate. You hear citations from Cicero, from Ulpian, from Gratian's Decretum. You hear logic applied to marriage law, to contracts, to the rights of the unborn, to the obligations of the dead. One master compares a line of Roman jurisprudence to an interpretation of the Talmud. Another draws from Arabic commentaries passed through Spain. Law here is not static. It grows, adapts, negotiates. It is not sacred, but human. The students are a kind of guild. They elect their own representatives, negotiate tuition, even strike when fees are too high or teachers too dull. This is new. Nowhere else have you seen students hold power. Not in the mosque, not in the cloister, not in the halls of Confucianism. Here, the learners shape the institution. They rent buildings, hire teachers, and move between cities when needed. Education is not a gift bestowed. It is a service demanded. And yet, with this freedom comes chaos. The city tolerates them because they bring coin and prestige, but fights are common. Rival nations among the students brawl over insults. Disputes erupt in lectures. A young scholar from Toulouse challenges his professor mid-sentence, quoting a conflicting gloss from Padua. The room freezes, then erupts in debate. You watch, stunned, as the teacher doesn't silence him but engages. "Argue it," he says. "Show your proof." The boy does, and the page turns. You begin to study Roman law yourself, slowly at first. The Latin returns like a half-remembered prayer. You trace the outlines of justice, liability, citizenship. You begin to see how rules are not just imposed but reasoned into place. You feel something shift inside, no longer merely seeking knowledge, but building it, placing each idea upon another, watching them align. One evening, in a tavern thick with smoke and argument, a student from Aragon leans toward you. "We are restoring the world," he says, not boasting but confessing, stone by stone, law by law. Then he drinks. And it's true. What you see here is not just a school, it's a rebirth. Not of the Roman Empire, but of the idea that minds can meet without war, that truth can be coaxed, not forced. You begin to hear rumours of other cities. Paris, where theology is growing wild like ivy. Cologne, where grammar blooms under strict hands. Oxford, where scholars read Aristotle by candlelight and argue in cloisters over the soul. The university is no longer a place. It is a pattern, a method, a movement. You pack your notes and prepare to travel again. South this time, toward the sun, where Cordoba and Toledo offer a different path, a place where Arabic, Hebrew and Latin live side by side, not as enemies but as mirrors. Because there's still more to learn, and now you know. The road never ends. It only changes languages. The journey to Al-Andalus feels like returning to something half-remembered, like a dream from your time in Nishapur, or a word from a language you once spoke fluently but haven't used in years. You travel south, passing the crumbling bones of Roman roads, through fields now green with vines and olive trees, down into valleys where the air turns sweet with orange blossoms. Spain, or what remains of it under Muslim rule, hums with life, slower, older, and somehow sharper. Cordoba appears not as a single city, but as a series of layers, minarets and bell towers, courtyards shaded with jasmine, narrow streets that twist like thought. You walk with the crowd, students, merchants, travellers, men in turbans and tunics, others in robes and crucifixes, women veiled or barefaced depending on their quarter. The languages around you shift like light through glass. Arabic, Hebrew, Mozarabic, Latin. You realise quickly that no one tongue is enough, but neither is any single truth. You make your way to the Beit al-Ilm, a house of knowledge not hidden behind walls or guarded by clerics, but housed in what was once a nobleman's villa. It has a garden in the middle, filled with cypress and a fountain that never stops whispering. You're told to wait in the shade and offered tea so dark it's nearly black. Someone reads aloud from Avicenna, someone else replies with a passage from Aristotle. No one is scolded for disagreement. It is expected. This is not a madrasa, not a cathedral school, not a university, and yet it is all of them. Here, in Cordoba, knowledge is not a ladder or a sermon. It is a table. Everyone sits, everyone speaks. You're introduced to a scholar named Ibn Raqiq, a small man with thin fingers and a beard that falls like a feather down his chin. He asks what you've studied. You tell him. Logic, scripture, law, calligraphy, argument. He nods. You'll begin with poetry, he says, and hands you a copy of the Mu'allaqat, the pre-Islamic odes. Because philosophy is just poetry in hiding. You don't argue. The days fall into rhythm. Morning prayers, quiet meals, study circles in the garden. No formal lectures, no grades. Instead, discussions. You sit with Jews reading the Mishnah in Arabic, with Christian monks passing the Psalms through the lens of Avicenna, with young Muslims reciting Plato's dialogues by memory, then offering their own interpretations. Translation is constant, between languages, between cultures, between minds. You come to understand that knowledge here is not owned. It is passed like bread. One evening, you're invited to Toledo. The journey is short, the purpose clear. You're to witness a translation, a full live conversion of text, from Arabic into Latin, assisted by a Christian scribe, a Muslim scholar, and a Jewish philosopher. They sit side by side at a long table under candlelight, speaking softly, arguing gently, consulting dictionaries and old glosses. The text in question is Galen, and before the night ends the entire chapter on fevers has changed tongues. You realise that this too is education, not in what is known, but in what can be made known to others. In Toledo, knowledge flows not from the teacher to the student, but from one language to another, one century into the next. It is fragile, constantly at risk. One mistranslation can lose a concept forever, but one accurate word, placed just right, can light centuries ahead. You stay for months. You begin helping with small phrases, then full lines. You watch entire worlds move through your ink. You copy Averro's commentaries into Latin. You read Maimonides in Arabic. You sit under moonlight with a Jewish scholar who recites from memory a list of every lost Greek manuscript, and who weeps over each one. We do not know what we've lost, he says, only that it mattered. And you understand then that the golden age of Al-Andalus is not a place or a time, it is a possibility. The idea that minds from different worlds can meet not to conquer or convert, but to understand. That learning is not a weapon, but a bridge. But the bridge is trembling. There are whispers in Cordoba, of unrest, of intolerance growing like mould in corners once bright. Students leave in small groups, disappearing northward. The libraries are still open, but the doors feel heavier. You sense an ending. You walk alone one morning through the courtyard of the great mosque, now also a church, depending on who controls it this week. The columns cast long shadows. A single student is copying a passage of Plato into Hebrew, humming under his breath. You leave quietly. There are other places now, Salerno, Montpellier, Prague. Seeds have been planted. Some will grow, some will vanish. But the path is not done. The ship creaks beneath you as it cuts across the waters of the Mediterranean, eastward toward the city that calls itself eternal. The sails are patched, the crew surly, but the sea is forgiving, and the stars still know your name. Nights are quiet on deck. You sleep near the stern, your notes bound in oilskin, your thoughts unsettled. You're leaving behind Al-Andalus, a place where languages touched each other like wind and stone, and heading toward a city whose name is both a memory and a promise, Constantinopolis. You arrive in the harbour of the Golden Horn beneath a sun as pale as old ivory. The city rises before you not like a fortress, not like a market, but like a myth. Walls layered in stone and brick and memory, domes swollen like the sky itself, 1,000 rooftops all red and slanted glowing in the morning haze. The air smells of incense and salt and iron. You step ashore into the remnants of an empire that refuses to end. Education here is not declared, it is assumed. Constantinople does not wear its learning on its sleeve. It hides it in manuscripts, in mosaics, in chants older than the language they now sing. You ask after schools, and are met with shrugs or guarded nods. Finally, an old priest at the Church of the Holy Apostles tells you what you seek. The Magnora, once the palace school of emperors, now crumbles in shadow, but the patriarchal school, attached to the great church of Hagia Sophia, still whispers with memory. You are sent there, through alleys that twist like veins beneath the city's heartbeat. The building is unremarkable, just a stone hall with arched windows and high ceilings, but inside the world turns quietly on ink. You're introduced to a didaskalos, a scholar in his 6th decade with eyes like cooled ash, and fingers ink-stained from copying Greek hexameters. He says his name once, then does not repeat it. He gestures to a bench, and you sit. Lessons begin not with speech, but with silence. The students, boys mostly thin and pale and serious, sit in rows of worn benches, each with a stylus, a wax tablet, and a small bound codex. They recite by memory: Homer, Hesiod, Psalms, Gregory of Nazianzus. Not for understanding, yet, but for rhythm, for structure. Words come before meaning. The body learns before the mind catches up. When discussion does come, it is not debate. It is ekphrasis, the unfolding of a thought like cloth. A phrase from Thucydides is expanded into metaphor. A single line of Aristotle is pulled like thread until it reveals the stitching beneath. This is not the raw argument of Bologna, nor the improvisation of Cordoba. It is refinement, purification, language made clean by repetition. You are given a copy of the Enchiridion of Epictetus, written in cramped script on sheepskin. The stoicism of it cuts into you like a blade. It is not things that disturb us, it reads, but our opinions about things. You copy it again and again, until the line no longer feels foreign. There is theology here, but it is woven so tightly with grammar and philosophy that it's hard to tell where one ends. The students learn to parse the Gospels in Greek, comparing Alexandrian and Antiochian traditions. They study the Cappadocians, trace the Filioque controversy with the care of surgeons. Logic is taught through John of Damascus, rhetoric through Basil, mathematics through Euclid, whose element still survives, line for line, as precise as any law. You begin to understand that Constantinople is not a city of newness, it is a city of preservation. The students do not innovate, they curate. They hold the fire against the wind and pass it, unburned, to the next hand. And yet, even here, under the mosaics and gilded domes, change is creeping in. Word comes of Selos, a philosopher at the imperial court who speaks too freely, who dares to blend Plato with Christian mysticism, who teaches not from memory, but from curiosity. His students are different. They ask why. You find one of them, young, feverish-eyed, scribbling not in wax but on rough parchment. He shows you a treatise on time, quoting Augustine and Plato in the same breath. He says the empire is crumbling, but ideas are not. He says Constantinople is no longer the centre of the world, but a mirror of all the places where minds still burn. We're not meant to keep it, he says. We're meant to pass it on. The bells ring for Vespers. Outside, the city softens into evening. You stand in the outer courtyard, watching doves land on a ruined column. The boy walks away, clutching his pages. You realise you've learned something here, but not what you expected. Not how to think, but how to hold on to thought. You leave Constantinople with little more than a new set of notes and a sharper sense of what can be lost. The journey calls you again, north this time, to Kiev, where Eastern Christianity has built its own schools under golden domes and snow-split skies. The road north is long and sometimes cruel. You cross thick forests where trees lean over mossy paths, their branches whispering secrets in an old, forgotten tongue. The air grows colder, sharper with pine and frost. The rivers swell with spring melt, and the earth softens into mud beneath your boots. You leave behind the grand mosaics and domes of Constantinople, and enter the vast, sprawling lands of the Slavs. Your destination is Kiev, the heart of Rus, where the Dnieper River winds wide and slow through fields and villages. The city is smaller than you expected, more wood than stone, more smoke than gold, but its pulse is steady. You can hear the chants before you see the churches, low, deep, echoing through the cold air like a slow hymn to the sky. The school you find is part monastery, part scriptorium, part temple of language itself. It is here, in these quiet halls, that the Cyrillic alphabet has been born. You watch as young boys and girls, though mostly boys, learn to read and write letters shaped from the Greek, but newly forged to fit the sounds of their own tongue. The script feels raw, still wet with invention, like wet clay moulded by careful hands. The teachers are stern, often silent, but their lessons ring clear. They teach not only scripture, but history and law, laws drawn not from Rome or Byzantium, but from the customs of the Rus themselves. The tales of saints and princes mingle with the cold logic of decrees, written now in a language that people can understand. You observe a class where the Ustav style of writing is practiced, each stroke deliberate, slow, almost meditative. The students chant the alphabet, their voices rising and falling like waves against the wooden walls. You try to join in, your tongue awkward with unfamiliar sounds, but the effort is met with smiles and nods. Language here is not only learned, it is lived. One evening, you meet a monk who speaks softly of the Primary Chronicle, a vast manuscript that traces the history of their people from pagan times to conversion. We write to remember, he says, because memory is our shield against forgetting. He shows you pages filled with Cyrillic letters, illuminated with small drawings of forests and rivers, battles and baptisms. You realise that in this place, education is both a gift and a defence. The Rus have been shaped by conquest and conversion, by fire and ice, and their schools reflect that ruggedness. There is less emphasis on debate or philosophy here. Instead, the focus is on identity, who we are, where we came from, and how to live as a people caught between worlds. The monastery's library is small but precious. Scrolls and codices sit alongside carved wooden tablets and fresh parchment. You handle a psalter written in Old Church Slavonic, the letters still sharp beneath your fingers. The script sings with a new voice, one that will soon echo far beyond these forests. Outside, the sun sets early, casting long shadows over the frozen river. The air is thick with smoke and prayer. You wrap your cloak tighter and watch as the students gather for evening prayers, their voices rising in unison, carrying their new words into the dark. You leave Kiev with a deeper understanding of how education is not one thing but many, shaped by place, language, and need. Each school you've visited is a thread in a vast tangled tapestry. You wonder where the next thread will take you. You travel far across vast steppes and jagged mountains, eastward beyond the forests and rivers of Rus, until the air changes again. Warmer now, dry but full of a different kind of life. The land unfolds beneath you like silk, and the distant peaks of the Himalayas stand like silent sentinels watching over the world. You have reached China during the Song dynasty, a land of tea and scrolls, of bamboo groves and scholars' gardens. Here, education is not just a matter of memory or faith. It is the axis upon which the empire turns. The state demands it, shapes it, and measures it with rigour unmatched elsewhere. The imperial examination system, centuries old but reaching new heights, is your gateway into society itself. To succeed is to gain honour, position and power. To fail is to return to the soil. You find yourself in Kaifeng, the capital, a sprawling city alive with lantern light and the murmur of countless voices. The streets teem with merchants, monks, poets and students, hurrying between schools, tea houses and examination halls. The smell of ink and paper is everywhere, a perfume of potential and pressure. The schools you visit are organised, orderly, almost austere. Large halls with rows of desks, each desk holding brush, inkstone and paper. The teachers, learned men with carefully trimmed beards and robes of silk, speak not in stories but in formulas and classical texts. The Confucian canon, the 4 books and 5 classics dominate every lesson. You hear the names Zhu Xi and Cheng Yi whispered with reverence, men who shaped the very way knowledge is framed here. You watch a lesson unfold in a private academy, where students practice calligraphy with slow, deliberate strokes, copying lines from the analects until the characters shine like polished jade. The rhythm of the brush is almost meditative, each mark a breath, each page a prayer. You're invited to try. Your hand trembles as you mimic the characters, feeling the rough paper under your fingers, the grainy resistance of the ink. Examinations are the heart of this world. Held in enormous halls built to impress and intimidate, they test not only knowledge but endurance. Candidates sit for days, writing essays on moral philosophy, poetry, governance and interpretation. The stakes are immense. Success can elevate a farmer's son to the halls of power, while failure often condemns a lifetime of obscurity. You listen as an older scholar explains the weight of the Keiju exam. It is not just about knowledge, he says quietly, but about embodying virtue, discipline, and the way of the sage. The Empire trusts only those who have passed these trials with their hearts and minds united. Outside the formal halls, education flows into everyday life. Families teach children to respect ancestors and study diligently. Libraries are stocked with commentaries, maps, and mathematical treatises. Poetry is prized not only as art but as a measure of one's soul. You overhear students reciting Li Bai and Du Fu beneath plum trees heavy with blossoms, yet there is tension beneath the surface. The system is rigid, slow to change. Some young scholars yearn for new ideas, new science, new philosophies from beyond the Empire's borders, but tradition holds fast. The scrolls of the ancients weigh heavily on their minds like chains and wings at once. You walk along the Yellow River at dusk, watching fishermen cast their nets and children playing by the banks. You realise that education here is not just a path to knowledge, it is a covenant, a social contract binding millions in shared ideals, hopes and fears. It is the backbone of a civilization both ancient and ever-renewing. You gather your notes and prepare to move on, knowing that your journey is far from over. Beyond the mountains and seas lie other worlds, other schools, other ways of learning. You will go next to the Islamic madrasas of the Middle East, where faith and reason intertwine under minarets and starry skies. Leaving the bamboo groves and tea-scented air of Song China behind, you set out across deserts and plains, beneath skies vast and unbroken. The world unfolds anew, shifting with every step, now the scent of spices and leather, the distant calls of merchants echoing in bustling bazaars. You find yourself drawn to the heart of the Islamic world, where the golden age of learning is not a dream but a living, breathing reality. You arrive in Baghdad, the jewel of the Abbasid Caliphate, a city whose name hums with promise. Here, education is both a spiritual journey and a scientific quest, woven tightly into the fabric of daily life. The madrasas, schools of higher learning, stand not only as centres of theology, but as vibrant hubs for philosophy, mathematics, medicine, and astronomy. The Grand House of Wisdom welcomes scholars from far and wide, a melting pot of Greek, Persian, Indian, and Arab thought. You walk through its marble halls where the air is thick with the smell of parchment and ink, the quiet murmurs of scribes copying texts, translating Aristotle into Arabic, expanding on Euclid's geometry. This is a place where knowledge is treasured like gold, stored carefully but shared freely. You join a lecture on falsafa, philosophy, as a teacher speaks softly about Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, whose writings on medicine and metaphysics blend reason and faith. The students listen intently, some taking notes in flowing script, others asking questions that peel back layers of understanding. The madrasa system here is formalised. Students attend lessons, memorise texts, and debate under watchful eyes. But it is also deeply personal. Teachers often serve as mentors, guiding not just minds but characters. The goal is not only to learn but to cultivate wisdom. In one courtyard, surrounded by orange trees and a fountain, you sit among students studying fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence. The discussions are careful, methodical, steeped in respect for tradition but open to interpretation. The calligraphy on the walls reminds you that every word is sacred, every letter a vessel for deeper meaning. You notice that women, though rarely admitted to the formal madrasas, participate in learning within their homes and communities, passing knowledge through generations in quieter ways. This subtle transmission of education is just as vital, a hidden current beneath the grandeur of the schools. One evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, you join a stargazing group led by a scholar versed in both astronomy and poetry. The sky is a vast dome of ink, dotted with shimmering calligraphy of stars. You learn that understanding the cosmos is not separate from understanding God. It is a reflection of divine order. You carry these lessons with you, feeling the weight and lightness of a tradition that embraces both the known and the mysterious. Baghdad's streets hum with possibility, but also with fragility. You sense the looming threats, political unrest, shifting powers that will soon challenge this flourishing centre. Still, the light of knowledge burns bright here, a beacon across deserts and time. From here, your path will lead to smaller madrasas in cities like Cairo and Damascus, each with their own flavour and focus, before journeying to centres of learning in the Indian subcontinent. The story of medieval education is vast, and you have only begun to trace its edges. You leave behind the grand city of Baghdad, stepping onto roads that wind southward toward Egypt, where the Nile spreads like a silver ribbon through sun-baked lands. Cairo rises ahead, a city alive with the hum of markets, the scent of spices, and the sounds of voices speaking in many tongues. Here, the madrasas take on a new life, shaped by local traditions and the tides of history. You find yourself at Al-Azhar, founded less than a century before your arrival, but already a towering beacon of learning. Its walls are cool beneath your fingers, carved from limestone and warmed by the sun, and inside you glimpse a world where scholars gather not just to study law and theology, but to wrestle with questions of philosophy, language, and science. The classrooms are modest, often little more than shaded courtyards or stone chambers. Students sit cross-legged, some holding fragile manuscripts, others writing in careful script on parchment. The teachers, men with flowing robes and attentive eyes, speak slowly, their words measured but alive with passion. You attend a session on tafsir, the interpretation of the Quran. The professor explains how every word can carry layers of meaning, from the literal to the mystical. The students ask questions that thread between certainty and doubt, seeking clarity in the divine text. You feel the weight of these discussions, not just academic but deeply personal, touching the very core of belief. Outside the lecture halls, the rhythm of life flows with the call to prayer, the laughter of children in narrow alleys, and the quiet hum of scribes copying texts by candlelight. You watch as young boys memorize passages, their voices rising and falling in gentle waves, echoing against the ancient stones. Education here is not separate from daily life. It is woven into the fabric of the city. Merchants discuss philosophy over tea. Artisans recite poetry as they work. Mothers teach their children wisdom in the market stalls. The madrasas are a centre, but learning flows in every direction. You also glimpse tensions beneath the surface. The city is a crossroads of cultures and beliefs, and debates between scholars can be fierce. You hear whispers of political struggles, of factions within the religious establishment vying for influence. Yet amidst this, the pursuit of knowledge continues steady and unbroken. As night falls, you stand on a rooftop overlooking the city's glowing minarets, the stars above as bright as the lanterns below. You think of the journey so far, how every school, every classroom is a world of its own, shaped by the land, the faith, and the people who gather there. From Cairo, your path will take you across deserts and mountains, to the courts and mosques of Andalusia, where Islamic, Christian, and Jewish scholars share ideas in a rare and vibrant dialogue. The story of medieval education is a journey through light and shadow, and the chapters yet to come promise even richer discoveries. The journey westward from Cairo takes you over sun-scorched plains and rugged hills, across the Strait of Gibraltar into the land known as Al-Andalus, medieval Spain, a place where cultures mingle like colours in a fading tapestry. Here, education blossoms amid the clash and blending of civilizations, where Muslim, Christian and Jewish scholars share space in libraries and courts, their voices overlapping in harmony and discord. You arrive in Cordoba, once the seat of the mighty Caliphate of Cordoba, now a city proud yet weary, still radiant with the memory of its golden age. The streets wind beneath ancient arches, the air perfumed with orange blossoms and the faintest hint of ink and parchment. Libraries, once filled with countless manuscripts, still hold remnants of their past glory. In the great mosque-turned university, students gather beneath high ceilings adorned with intricate geometric patterns, the sunlight filtering through latticework, casting shifting mosaics on stone floors. Education here is not confined to religion or philosophy, but embraces the sciences, astronomy, medicine, mathematics, as well as poetry and music. You sit among students listening to a teacher who speaks of Al-Zarawi, the great surgeon whose medical texts travel beyond these lands, shaping knowledge for centuries to come. The lessons are rich with references to Greek, Roman and Islamic scholars, woven together in a tapestry of respect and curiosity. The classrooms are vibrant, alive with debate. You hear voices discuss the nature of light, the healing power of herbs, the rhythm of poetry, and the mysteries of the stars. The culture of learning is expansive and deeply interconnected, transcending borders and faiths. You meet a young Jewish scholar who tells you how Maimonides' works are studied alongside those of Avicenna and Aristotle, how knowledge is a shared inheritance. He speaks softly of the fragility of this coexistence, aware of the tensions that simmer beneath the surface, yet hopeful in the power of ideas to bridge divides. In quiet moments, you wander the city's gardens, where fountains sing and cypresses sway, feeling the pulse of a world where education is a light flickering between shadows. The libraries may no longer hold all their scrolls, but the spirit of inquiry persists, carried in the minds and hearts of those who still seek. You sense that this chapter of learning, though vibrant, is perched on the edge of change. Political upheavals and religious conflicts will soon alter the landscape, but for now the city breathes with knowledge, a beacon in a turbulent time. Your path will next take you north, toward the emerging universities of Europe, where scholasticism begins to shape a new intellectual order, drawing from all these ancient wells of wisdom. The story of education continues, winding through the centuries, ever evolving. Leaving the warmth and colour of Al-Andalus behind, you travel northward into a different world, one of misty hills, dense forests, and stone cathedrals rising like giants from the earth. The year is close to 1025, and Europe is waking slowly from the long shadows of the early Middle Ages. The monastic schools that have kept knowledge alive are giving way to a new kind of institution, the cathedral schools, precursors to the great medieval universities. You arrive in the city of Chartres, known for its soaring cathedral, whose stained glass windows catch the light and scatter it like jewels across the cold stone floors. The school here is small, housed within the cloisters where monks and clerics study sacred texts, but it hums with the quiet energy of learning. This place is both sanctuary and forge, shaping minds as much as spirits. You sit among young clerics as they pore over copies of Boethius, Augustine, and the Bible itself. Their Latin is careful but eager. They memorize psalms and chants, practice rhetoric, and study the basics of arithmetic and music as part of the quadrivium. Education is framed by faith, yet a curiosity about the natural world flickers beneath the surface. The teacher speaks slowly, carefully, weaving the threads of scripture with early Christian philosophy. The students ask questions not just about God, but about the order of creation, how the stars move, what makes a number perfect, why music stirs the soul. You feel the beginning of something vast, a hunger to understand not only divine mysteries, but the world itself. Outside, the city buzzes with merchants and pilgrims, their footsteps echoing on cobblestones worn smooth by centuries. The contrast between the sacred quiet of the school and the lively streets is striking. Yet both are part of the same world, linked by a growing thirst for knowledge. You visit the cathedral's famed library, a humble collection of vellum manuscripts, each page fragile but precious. The monks guard these treasures zealously, copying texts by hand to preserve ancient wisdom. You run your fingers over a manuscript of Isidore of Seville's Etymologie, a compendium that stitches together knowledge from the classical world into a Christian framework. The air is cool, scented faintly with candle wax and parchment. You realise that education here is a bridge between the past and the future, between faith and reason, between silence and debate. The seeds of the universities, which will soon rise in Paris, Bologna and Oxford, are taking root in these cloisters and halls. Your journey will next lead you to these burgeoning centres of learning, where scholasticism and disputation begin to reshape the medieval mind, setting the stage for an intellectual awakening that will echo through centuries. You travel farther north, following winding rivers and dusty roads that carry you into the heart of medieval Europe's emerging intellectual centres. The air grows cooler, the forests denser, and the villages give way to towns where stone walls and narrow streets hold stories in their shadows. You arrive in Paris, a city that, in this century, is beginning to stir with the restless energy of a new kind of school, the university. Unlike the cloistered quiet of monastic schools, the University of Paris pulses with life and debate. Students and masters gather in crowded halls and open courtyards, their voices rising and falling in arguments over theology, law and philosophy. The air smells of damp stone, ink and heated discourse. You find yourself seated in a wooden lecture hall, the benches rough beneath you, the air thick with the murmur of Latin. The master speaks of Aristotle, whose works, recently reintroduced from Arabic translations, challenge old ideas and spark new questions. You watch as students listen, some taking careful notes, others leaning forward with eagerness, eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. The curriculum is rigorous and structured, divided into the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, logic, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Here, the goal is to master language and reasoning, to debate with clarity and precision, and ultimately to understand God's creation through reason as well as faith. You witness lively disputations, formal debates where students must defend or oppose propositions before peers and teachers. The atmosphere is intense but respectful, a dance of minds sharpened by tradition and curiosity alike. You sense the birth of a new scholarly culture, one that values questioning as much as reverence. The university is a melting pot, drawing young men from across Europe, France, England, Italy and beyond, each bringing their own dialects and perspectives. The city itself is alive with the buzz of taverns and bookshops, of scribes copying texts late into the night, and of sermons echoing from the great cathedral nearby. You visit the library, a modest collection of parchment and vellum, but growing rapidly as scholars bring manuscripts from distant lands. You glimpse glosses in the margins, the notes of students and teachers wrestling with difficult texts, their handwriting a mosaic of thought and tradition. Education here feels both ancient and new, rooted in the church but reaching toward a broader horizon. You realise that the university is more than a school. It is a community, a place where knowledge is not only received but contested, shaped and passed on. As the sun sets over the Seine, you stand on a bridge watching the city glow with lantern light. The future feels uncertain, yet alive with possibility. The seeds of Renaissance and reform, revolution and reason, are quietly being sown in these halls. Your journey will next take you to other European centres, Bologna's law schools, Oxford's lecture halls and beyond, each with their own stories and traditions. The tapestry of medieval education is vast, woven with threads from every corner of the world you've visited. As you leave behind the bustling streets of Paris, your journey takes you southward to Bologna, a city that pulses with a different rhythm, a rhythm shaped by law, debate, and the pursuit of justice. It is here, in the early 11th century, that one of Europe's first universities truly takes shape, famed especially for its focus on jurisprudence, the study of law. The city is alive with the sounds of commerce and conversation, the clang of blacksmiths and the call of street vendors. But amidst the noise, the university's halls offer a quieter sanctuary, where scholars gather beneath vaulted ceilings to dissect the complexities of Roman law. The Corpus Juris Civilis, rediscovered centuries earlier, is the cornerstone of their study, a vast, intricate body of legal principles compiled under the Byzantine Emperor Justinian. You find yourself in a lecture hall, its stone walls etched with faint graffiti left by generations of students. The teacher, a glossator, reads from a manuscript while explaining the layers of interpretation written in the margins. These glosses, careful notes and clarifications, are a method of learning and teaching, a way of navigating ancient texts that seem both remote and urgent. Students sit on wooden benches, some hunched over scrolls, others listening intently. The atmosphere is serious but animated, the language Latin flowing steadily as the scholars debate questions of rights, contracts, and obligations. The law is not abstract here, it governs daily life, property, and disputes, and mastery of it promises a career in courts and administration. You observe how education here is intensely practical. Unlike the theological debates of Paris, Bologna's focus is on applying knowledge to the world, on preparing young men for roles as judges, lawyers, and advisors. Yet there is also room for philosophy and ethics, understanding not only what laws are, but why they matter. Outside the lecture rooms, the city's streets teem with students from across Europe. Italians, Germans, Frenchmen, each bringing diverse accents and ideas. They gather in inns and taverns, sharing stories and forging friendships, creating a vibrant intellectual community beyond the classroom. You stroll through narrow alleys lined with parchment sellers and scribes, feeling the pulse of a city where knowledge is both tradition and innovation. The scent of leather-bound books and fresh ink mingles with bread baking in nearby ovens, a reminder that learning here is part of a larger living world. Your journey will soon lead you to Oxford and Cambridge, where the traditions of cathedral schools and universities merge, and where education begins to take on forms recognisable to us today. But for now, Bologna remains a testament to the power of law and learning intertwined. Leaving the warmth of Italy behind, you travel north once more, crossing rolling hills and river valleys until you reach England, where a different kind of academic awakening is taking root. The year is roughly 1100, and Oxford is beginning to emerge from its humble origins as a collection of halls and churches into a recognised centre of learning. The great medieval universities are still young, but the rhythm of study and debate pulses strongly here. Oxford's streets are narrow and winding, lined with timber-frame buildings and bustling markets. You weave your way to a stone hall where scholars gather, their voices echoing softly in the cloisters. The curriculum is still forming, a blend of theology, the liberal arts, and emerging fields like canon law. Students wear simple robes, their faces earnest with concentration and curiosity. You take a seat among them as a learned teacher lectures on the works of Boethius and Augustine, texts that serve as foundations for understanding God and the world. Latin is the language of instruction, its formal precision a key to unlocking ancient wisdom. The study of grammar, rhetoric and logic, the trivium, prepares students to argue effectively, while the quadrivium introduces them to the mathematical order of creation. The air in the hall is cool, scented faintly with wood smoke and parchment. You notice students copying manuscripts by candlelight, their hands steady despite the dim glow. Education here is communal and intense, a shared journey through texts and ideas that shape minds and spirits alike. Outside, the city is alive with pilgrims, merchants and craftsmen. The nearby River Thames murmurs quietly, a constant companion to the scholars' daily routines. You glimpse conversations in taverns where students debate theology and philosophy late into the night, their voices rising and falling like a gentle tide. The university is not yet fully formalised, but its spirit is growing, a place where learning is a calling, a vocation, and a way of life. The legacy of cathedral schools and monastic traditions lingers, but a new energy drives these young scholars to question, to seek, to understand. As the sun sets behind spires and rooftops, you reflect on the journey so far, through monasteries and madrasas, cloisters and courts. Each step reveals how education, though shaped by faith and culture, is a universal human quest, a reaching toward knowledge, meaning and connection. Your path will soon lead you to the great libraries and halls of the East, where Confucian ideals shape scholars and statesmen, weaving a different but equally profound story of education. The world of learning, after all, is vast and diverse. As you leave the cobbled streets of medieval England behind, your journey bends eastward across vast landscapes, rivers and mountain passes, until you find yourself in the sprawling empire of Song Dynasty China. The world here is painted with delicate brushstrokes of bamboo groves, jade-green rice paddies, and pagodas that pierce misty skies. Education is a solemn and intricate art, woven deeply into the fabric of society and governance. you arrive at a Confucian academy, a place both serene and exacting. The academy sits nestled among rolling hills, its buildings crafted from wood and stone, roofs curving upward like birds' wings poised to take flight. The air carries the scent of pine and ink, and the faint murmur of students reciting texts floats softly on the breeze. Inside, the atmosphere is disciplined yet reflective. Young men sit in neat rows, their eyes focused on scrolls of the Analects of Confucius, the Book of Odes, and the Classic of Rites. The curriculum is rigorous, grounded in memorization, interpretation, and moral cultivation. Every lesson is a step not only toward knowledge, but toward becoming a virtuous person, a yunzi, the ideal Confucian gentleman. Teachers speak quietly but firmly, emphasizing the importance of filial piety, righteousness, and the harmony between heaven, earth, and humanity. Students practice calligraphy, mastering brushstrokes with patient repetition, understanding that the way a character is written reveals one's character itself. The Academy's purpose stretches beyond personal enlightenment. It is a gateway to the imperial examinations, a path to becoming a government official, a role carrying immense responsibility and honour. Success means serving the emperor, governing justly, and maintaining the moral order of the realm. You observe a lesson in poetry, where the subtle rhythms and imagery evoke both nature's beauty and the complexities of human emotion. Education here is as much about cultivating the heart as the mind, blending intellect and ethics seamlessly. Outside the academy walls, life moves with quiet purpose. Farmers tend to fields, artisans shape ceramics, and merchants travel along the Silk Road, bringing news and goods from distant lands. The Confucian ideal permeates daily life, guiding social relationships and community harmony. You feel the weight of tradition, but also a vibrant energy, the pulse of a civilization valuing balance, order, and continual learning. This system of education has endured for centuries and will shape millions for many more to come. Your journey will soon lead you deeper into East Asia and beyond, exploring how other cultures nurture knowledge and wisdom. The story of education is vast, each thread distinct but connected in its search for meaning. You remain in the Song dynasty's embrace, yet your path takes you now into the quieter corners of this vast empire, where the Confucian Academy's influence seeps into villages and towns, shaping lives far beyond its stone walls. You imagine yourself walking along a narrow dirt road lined with willows, the soft rustle of their leaves a gentle song in the summer breeze. The sun filters through misty air, dappling the ground with shifting patterns of light and shadow. The distant murmur of a stream mingles with the rhythmic clacking of wooden sandals on stone. The academy here feels less formal, but no less essential. You find a humble study room within a scholar's home, its paper windows thin and delicate, framed by slender wooden lattices. The scent of ink and freshly ground charcoal lingers in the air, along with faint traces of green tea. Students gather here in smaller numbers, seated on woven mats, their postures straight but relaxed as they listen to their teacher's measured voice. The lesson focuses on the moral teachings of Confucius, whose words are recited with reverence and deep thought. To learn without thinking is labour lost. To think without learning is perilous, the teacher reminds them softly, emphasising the balance between study and reflection. The students nod, their expressions attentive yet thoughtful, absorbing more than words, absorbing a way of life. You watch as a young scholar, perhaps no older than yourself, practices calligraphy, her brush dipping and gliding over rice paper. Each stroke is deliberate, a dance of control and grace. You sense that this is not mere writing, but meditation, a discipline sharpening the mind while calming the spirit. The characters form landscapes, stories, and ideas, connecting the present to the ancient past. Education here is as much about self-cultivation as it is about knowledge. The teachings aim to nurture harmony, within the individual, within families, and within the empire. The Confucian ideal of Li, or proper ritual and conduct, underpins every lesson, guiding actions both grand and mundane. Respect for elders, loyalty to rulers, and the pursuit of justice are threads woven tightly into daily life. Beyond the classroom, the village hums with simple rhythms, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the soft coo of doves, the distant laughter of children playing near rice paddies. Elderly villagers sit beneath ancient trees, sharing stories that blend history, philosophy, and practical wisdom. You understand that learning here is not confined to books, but lived through experience and community. As the afternoon light softens, you stroll toward a nearby temple, where incense smoke coils lazily in the air. Monks move silently through stone corridors, their chants a low, steady pulse. Though the Confucian Academy and the Buddhist temple serve different purposes, you see how their worlds intertwine, both nurturing minds and spirits, each in its own way. The imperial examination system looms over all of this, an immense and demanding ladder that offers a path to power and prestige, but also immense pressure. Families invest everything in preparing their sons, understanding that success can transform destinies. The exams test not only memory, but interpretation, composition, and moral insight, requiring years of rigorous preparation. You sense the weight of this tradition, the hopes and fears bound tightly together in ink and paper. Yet beneath it all is a profound belief in the power of education to shape not just individuals but the very fabric of society. As evening settles, you pause on a hill overlooking the village, watching lanterns flicker to life like fireflies against the deepening blue of the sky. The world feels both vast and intimate, a place where ancient wisdom breathes in quiet moments, waiting to be discovered anew. Your journey will soon lead you further east and south, to the courts and schools of Japan and Korea, where Confucian ideals merge with local customs and spiritual practices. The story of education, you realize, is endless, a flowing river that carries the hopes of countless generations. Your journey continues eastward across the East China Sea, where the gentle waves lap against the shores of Japan. It is the early 11th century, and the Heian period is in full bloom, a time of refined elegance, poetry, and courtly culture. Education here takes a form quite distinct from the academies and universities you've visited, yet it is no less vital, deeply entwined with social status, artistry, and governance. You arrive at a noble estate near Kyoto, where young courtiers and aristocrats study not only Chinese classics, but also Japanese literature, calligraphy, and music. The air is scented with incense and cherry blossoms, and the sound of a koto string's soft melody drifts through paper-sliding doors. Here, learning is an aesthetic pursuit as much as an intellectual one. Inside a sunlit room adorned with silk scrolls and lacquered furniture, a lady of the court recites lines from the tale of Genji, a masterpiece woven from the fabric of court life and human emotion. Education for noble women often centres on poetry, etiquette, and the arts, skills essential for navigating the complex social world of the imperial court. Meanwhile, young men study Confucian classics and Chinese writing, preparing for government service. They learn kanbun, a stylized form of classical Chinese writing, alongside native scripts, blending cultures and languages. The court values literary skill and refined manners, believing that governance requires both wisdom and grace. Education is also deeply linked to Buddhist temples, which serve as centres of learning and spiritual practice. Monks copy sutras with painstaking care, and schools within temple complexes teach philosophy, ethics, and meditation. The balance of secular and sacred knowledge shapes the minds of many. You walk through gardens where stone lanterns cast long shadows, past koi ponds and blooming irises. The peaceful surroundings mirror the harmony sought in education, a harmony between mind, body, and spirit. Despite its beauty, education here is often reserved for the elite. Common folk learn trades and crafts through apprenticeships and oral traditions. Yet the influence of Confucian ideals, filial piety, loyalty, and respect permeates all levels of society. The seasons turn, and you witness festivals where poetry contests and calligraphy displays celebrate learning as both an art and a moral pursuit. The aesthetic refinement of Heian Japan offers a unique lens on education, not just as accumulation of knowledge, but as cultivation of character and beauty. As your thoughts linger on this delicate world, you prepare to journey next to the Korean peninsula, where Confucianism is taking root amidst its own evolving traditions. The tapestry of medieval education continues to unfold, vast and intricate as ever. From the cherry blossoms of Heian Japan, your journey carries you northwest across the Yellow Sea to the Korean kingdom of Goryeo, a land where Confucian ideals are steadily weaving into the fabric of society, shaping education, governance, and culture. It is the early 12th century, and though Buddhism remains a powerful force, Confucian academies, Seowon, are emerging as centres of learning and moral instruction. You arrive at a secluded academy nestled among rolling hills and towering pines. Its wooden buildings simple but sturdy, with gently curved tiled roofs and open courtyards. The air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine needles and the distant melody of a bamboo flute. Students gather beneath the shadow of ancient trees, their voices low as they recite passages from the Analects and study the rituals that govern proper conduct. The curriculum here is rigorous, combining the study of Chinese classics with lessons on poetry, calligraphy, and governance. Students learn not only to memorize but to embody the virtues of loyalty, filial piety, and righteousness. The teacher's voice is calm but firm, emphasizing that education is not just about knowledge, but about moral transformation. You watch as students engage in quiet debate, exploring the meanings behind the texts and considering their application to daily life and statecraft. The academy is both a sanctuary for learning and a forge for future officials who will serve the kingdom with wisdom and integrity. Outside the academy walls, village life moves with steady rhythms. Farmers tend terraced fields, artisans shape ceramics, and merchants travel along well-worn roads linking distant regions. Confucian principles shape social relations: respect for elders, adherence to ritual, and commitment to community harmony. You visit a nearby temple where Buddhist monks and Confucian scholars sometimes exchange ideas, reflecting the dynamic interplay between these traditions. Education here is holistic, aiming to nurture both the mind and the spirit. The imperial examination system inspired by China is slowly being adopted, offering a path to government service based on merit rather than birth. This system promises a future where talent and learning can transcend social divisions, though the road is steep and demanding. As twilight descends, lanterns glow softly along the academy's paths, casting long shadows over stone steps and flowering shrubs. The quiet murmur of study and contemplation continues into the evening, a testament to the enduring power of education as a light against the darkness of uncertainty. Your journey will soon lead you back westward, to the vast Islamic world, where madrasas are flourishing as centres of science, philosophy and faith. Another chapter in the rich story of medieval education. You cross deserts and mountains, travelling westward into the vast and vibrant world of the medieval Islamic Golden Age, where cities like Baghdad, Cairo and Cordoba shine as beacons of knowledge and learning. It is the 11th century, a time when madrasas, centres of higher education, are flourishing, blending religious devotion with scientific inquiry and philosophical debate. You find yourself in the bustling city of Baghdad, its streets alive with the scents of spices, the calls of merchants, and the murmur of scholars gathered in courtyards and lecture halls. The Great House of Wisdom has been a hub for centuries, where texts from Greece, Persia, India, and beyond have been translated, studied, and expanded upon. You enter a madrasa, its architecture graceful and purposeful, with arched doorways, intricate tile work, and a central courtyard shaded by date palms. Students sit cross-legged on rugs, attentively listening to a teacher who speaks softly but clearly about the principles of jurisprudence, fiqh, or the mysteries of mathematics and astronomy. The air is cool, scented faintly with rosewater and ink. Here, education is rigorous and comprehensive. The Quran and Hadith form the spiritual core, grounding students in faith and law. Yet alongside religious studies, subjects like medicine, philosophy, logic and poetry are taught with equal seriousness. Scholars debate Aristotle's works alongside Islamic theology, weaving together reason and revelation. You watch a young student carefully copying a manuscript by candlelight, the script flowing elegantly across the page. The dedication to preserving and transmitting knowledge is palpable, a labour of love and devotion. Teachers encourage questioning and critical thinking, fostering an environment where learning is both a duty and a joy. The madrasa serves not only as a school, but also as a community centre. Students pray together, share meals, and support one another in their studies and spiritual growth. The pursuit of knowledge is seen as a path to understanding God's creation more deeply, and scholarship is held in the highest esteem. Outside, the city thrums with life. Craftsmen at work, traders from distant lands, poets reciting verses in marketplaces. Baghdad is a crossroads of cultures and ideas, where East meets West and Old meets New. The madrasa system will spread across the Islamic world and beyond, influencing educational institutions for centuries to come. You sense the profound impact of this intellectual flowering, which not only preserves ancient wisdom, but ignites new discoveries that ripple through time. Your journey will soon take you further west, to the universities of medieval Spain and the crossroads of Christian and Muslim knowledge, where the story of education continues to unfold in rich and unexpected ways. From the shimmering streets of Baghdad, your path curves westward across the Mediterranean, bringing you to the rich cultural crossroads of Al-Andalus, medieval Muslim Spain. It is the 11th century, and cities like Córdoba and Granada glow not only with the light of the sun but with the brilliance of learning, where Muslim, Christian and Jewish scholars mingle, exchanging ideas in a vibrant intellectual tapestry. You step into a madrasa nestled within Córdoba's winding streets. The building is a masterpiece of Islamic architecture, its white stucco walls adorned with geometric patterns and verses from the Quran, its interior cool and shadowed, offering respite from the hot sun outside. You enter a courtyard where orange trees release a delicate fragrance, and a gentle fountain murmurs quietly, a soothing rhythm to the scholar's discourse. Students draped in flowing robes sit cross-legged on cushions, their faces serene yet attentive. A teacher, wise and patient, unfolds a manuscript of philosophical treatises, guiding the students through the works of Aristotle, Avicenna, and Al-Farabi. The dialogue is lively but respectful, as students grapple with questions of existence, knowledge, and the divine. Education here is a remarkable blend of tradition and innovation. Alongside religious law, students study medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and poetry, fields in which Al-Andalus has become a world leader. Libraries brim with texts from across the known world, translated into Arabic and studied with care. The atmosphere is one of curiosity and reverence. You overhear conversations about the harmony between reason and faith, and about how the pursuit of knowledge is itself a form of worship. Scholars believe that by understanding the natural world, they come closer to understanding God's grand design. Outside the madrasa, Córdoba's streets bustle with markets where spices, silk and books are traded. The city is a melting pot, where multiple languages are spoken and cultures blend seamlessly. You see artisans at work carving intricate woodwork and metal, poets composing verses under moonlit skies. The educational spirit of Al-Andalus is a beacon that will influence the emerging universities of Europe, carrying classical knowledge back west through translations and scholarly exchange. It is a place where the light of learning shines brightly amid the shadows of conflict and change. As twilight deepens, you walk along the city's walls, gazing out over the Guadalquivir River, feeling the pulse of a world where knowledge is treasured and fiercely pursued. The story of medieval education continues, rich with diversity and complexity, as your journey now turns north toward the growing centres of learning in Christian Europe. Travelling northward from Al-Andalus, you cross the rugged terrain of the Pyrenees into the heart of Christian Europe, arriving in the burgeoning city of Paris in the late 12th century. The medieval university here is taking shape amid the winding streets and stone churches, a new kind of institution dedicated to learning, debate, and the training of clergy and scholars. The University of Paris, or the Studium, is not yet the grand complex it will become, but its spirit is already palpable. You step through a narrow archway into a courtyard, where students in simple robes gather beneath the grey sky, their voices low with the murmur of Latin prayers and quiet discussions. The air smells faintly of smoke and damp stone, a reminder of the city's ever-present cold and rain. The school buildings are clustered around the Cathedral of Notre Dame, whose soaring Gothic arches and stained glass windows cast shifting patterns of coloured light. Inside one of the halls, you find yourself seated among students listening intently to a master explaining the works of Aristotle, recently reintroduced to Europe through translations from Arabic and Greek. The curriculum is expanding rapidly. Theology remains paramount, but students now study logic, natural philosophy, grammar and rhetoric, the foundational trivium and quadrivium inherited from earlier traditions. Education is demanding and disciplined. Students pore over text by candlelight, copying manuscripts, memorizing passages and engaging in disputations, structured debates designed to sharpen reasoning and argumentation. The atmosphere is one of rigorous intellectual challenge, tempered by deep reverence for faith. You notice the communal nature of study here. Students live in small colleges or halls, sharing meals, prayers and study sessions. Teachers, often clerics, hold authority but encourage dialogue, reflecting a gradual shift toward questioning and inquiry. This tension between tradition and innovation will define medieval scholasticism. Outside the classroom, the city is alive with the rhythms of medieval life, merchants calling in the marketplace, craftsmen shaping wood and metal, clergy moving in solemn processions. The university is both a refuge from and a reflection of this vibrant urban world. Education in Paris and other emerging European universities will become a cornerstone of intellectual life for centuries to come. Here, the seeds of the Renaissance are quietly sown, nurtured by the rediscovery of classical knowledge and the enduring quest to understand God and creation. As twilight deepens and the bells of Notre Dame toll softly, you prepare to continue your journey, moving next to the universities of Italy, where scholastic inquiry and humanism will intertwine in new and profound ways. Leaving the foggy streets of Paris behind, you journey southward across the Alps into the warm, sunlit cities of medieval Italy, where education takes on fresh dimensions amid the thriving urban centres of Bologna, Padua, and later Florence. It is the 12th century, and the Italian city-states are becoming vibrant hubs not only of commerce and art, but also of learning, marking an important chapter in the history of medieval education. You find yourself walking the narrow cobblestone streets of Bologna, home to the oldest university in Europe, founded just decades earlier. The city hums with the energy of students from across the continent, young men eager to study law, medicine, and the liberal arts. The university buildings are humble, modest structures clustered near the city's grand basilicas, yet their reputation draws scholars from far and wide. Inside a lecture hall you sit among a diverse group of students as a professor discusses Roman law, reading aloud from dusty manuscripts. Law is the cornerstone of Bologna's curriculum, reflecting the city's role as a legal and commercial hub. The study of law is meticulous and demanding, requiring careful interpretation of texts, debate over legal principles, and memorization of complex codes. The atmosphere is vibrant and often noisy. Students bargain for lodging, gather in taverns to discuss lessons, and organize guilds to protect their rights and privileges. Education is not confined to silent reading. It pulses with argument, performance, and social interaction. Beyond law, medicine attracts many students. Lectures on anatomy and herbal remedies are held in rooms filled with the scent of dried plants and parchment. Professors draw from classical sources like Galen and Hippocrates, blending them with contemporary observations. The pursuit of healing knowledge is both practical and philosophical. The liberal arts, grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy form the foundation of study, preparing students for careers in the church, government, or commerce. The emphasis on rhetoric and debate reflects the importance of persuasion in the courts and councils of medieval Italy. Outside the university walls, the city itself is a living classroom. Markets overflow with goods from distant lands, artisans display their crafts, and scholars converse in Latin, Italian, and various dialects. The wealth and complexity of the city shape the education within, offering lessons not only from books, but from the world around. The spirit of inquiry is palpable here, a blend of tradition and innovation that will soon ripple outward, influencing the Renaissance and beyond. Education is becoming more accessible, more dynamic, and more connected to everyday life. As evening falls, you stroll along the Arno River, watching the sun's golden light fade behind terracotta roofs and bell towers. The city's heartbeat slows but never ceases, a reminder that learning is both timeless and alive. Your journey will next lead you north again, to the monastic schools of the Germanic lands, where scholarship continues amid cloisters and forests. From the bustling Italian cities, your path turns northward into the dense forests and rolling hills of the Germanic lands, where monastic schools form the backbone of education during the early medieval period. It is the 10th and 11th centuries, a time when monasteries serve not only as spiritual centres, but as vital hubs of learning, preservation, and cultural transmission in a Europe still emerging from the shadows of earlier turmoil. You find yourself approaching a Benedictine abbey, its stone walls weathered by centuries yet standing strong beneath towering firs. The sound of chanting monks rises softly from within, filling the cool morning air with a calm resonance. The abbey is surrounded by cultivated gardens and simple wooden buildings, where novices and monks alike gather to study. Inside the scriptorium, candlelight flickers over rows of wooden desks, where scribes meticulously copy manuscripts by hand. The scent of parchment, ink, and beeswax lingers, mingling with the faint aroma of herbs drying nearby. Education here is deeply intertwined with religious devotion. Learning is seen as a sacred duty to preserve the word of God and the wisdom of the ancients. Students, mostly young monks, learn Latin grammar and scripture, dedicating long hours to memorization, chanting, and silent reflection. The rule of Saint Benedict governs daily life, balancing study, prayer, and manual labour. The routine is strict yet purposeful, fostering discipline and humility. Beyond language and theology, the Abbey's library holds classical texts, philosophy, history, and medicine that the monks study and copy, bridging ancient knowledge to a new age. Illumination of manuscripts turns each page into a work of art, a labour of devotion that also preserves culture. You glimpse novices practising penmanship, their hands steady as they form delicate letters, while others study music, learning Gregorian chant that fills the chapel with haunting beauty. The curriculum is limited compared to later universities, but its focus on literacy and faith lays critical foundations. Outside the abbey, the surrounding village pulses with simple life. Farmers tending fields, craftsmen working wood and iron, children playing near the stream. The monastery often serves as a centre of education for local youth who come to learn reading and basic arithmetic. The monastic schools are essential guardians of knowledge through a turbulent era, their quiet work ensuring the survival of intellectual traditions that will bloom in the centuries to come. Their influence stretches across Europe, shaping the very idea of learning and scholarship. As dusk falls, you stand in the cloister, the soft glow of lanterns reflecting on stone arches and leafy vines. The abbey feels timeless, a sanctuary where faith and knowledge are woven into daily life. Your journey will soon carry you back south and west, to the emerging cathedral schools that will give rise to Europe's great medieval universities. Leaving the quiet abbey cloisters behind, your journey brings you to the growing cities of medieval Europe, where cathedral schools emerge as new centres of learning during the 11th and 12th centuries. These schools, attached to great cathedrals and episcopal seats, mark a turning point in medieval education, bridging monastic traditions with the demands of an increasingly complex society, and laying the groundwork for the rise of universities. You stand before the towering facade of the Cathedral of Chartres in northern France, its soaring Gothic spires reaching toward the heavens. The morning light filters through the stained glass, casting colourful patterns onto the stone floor. Inside, students gather in small groups, their voices hushed as they prepare for lessons in Latin grammar, logic, and the sacred scriptures. The cathedral school is a place of discipline and debate, where young clerics and sometimes lay students study under the watchful eye of the bishop or a master scholar. The curriculum is expanding, no longer confined solely to religious instruction, but including the liberal arts, the trivium of grammar, rhetoric and logic, and the quadrivium of arithmetic, geometry, music and astronomy. This broader education aims to equip students for roles in the church, administration, and even the growing world of trade. You follow a lesson where the master reads from Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, a text that blends classical thought with Christian wisdom. Students engage in questions and answers, honing their ability to argue and reason, skills prized in both spiritual and civic life. The spirit of scholasticism is beginning to take root here, encouraging rigorous inquiry while maintaining faith at its centre. Beyond the classroom, the cathedral school is a vibrant social hub. Students debate in cloisters, copy texts in scriptoria, and attend services in the cathedral's grand nave. The city outside hums with merchants, craftsmen and pilgrims, all contributing to a world increasingly connected through commerce and ideas. The rise of cathedral schools also reflects a growing demand for educated clergy to serve the expanding and more organised medieval church. Education becomes a pathway not only to religious devotion, but also to social mobility, as talent and learning open doors otherwise closed by birth. You sense the tension and excitement of this period, a time when ancient knowledge is rediscovered, new methods of teaching develop, and the seeds of modern universities are sown. The intellectual landscape is shifting, and education becomes both a personal journey and a communal endeavour. As twilight deepens, the cathedral bells toll softly, calling the faithful to evening prayer. You linger for a moment in the shadow of the great rose window, feeling the pulse of a world on the cusp of transformation. Your path will soon lead to the great medieval universities of England and beyond, where the story of education continues to evolve. From the grandeur of Chartres your journey winds northwest to the English city of Oxford, where by the late 12th century a university is quietly taking shape amid the narrow streets and timber-framed houses. Unlike the monastic seclusion of earlier centres, Oxford pulses with the energy of a growing student body, scholars from England and across Europe drawn here by the promise of knowledge and debate. You find yourself wandering along the River Thames on a misty morning, the sound of water mingling with the distant tolling of church bells. The air is cool and fresh, carrying hints of wood smoke and freshly turned earth from nearby gardens. Students gather in halls and colleges, groups huddled around flickering candles, poring over manuscripts in Latin and vernacular English alike. The curriculum at Oxford is diverse and demanding. Theology remains the cornerstone, but students also delve into law, medicine, the arts, and emerging natural philosophy. The study of logic and dialectic is rigorous, sharpening minds for disputation, a hallmark of scholastic method. Professors challenge students to question, analyse and defend ideas in formal debates that can stretch late into the night. Life here is both academic and communal. You see students living in modest chambers, sharing meals in great halls and walking cloistered paths, balancing study with prayer. The town itself buzzes with taverns, bookshops, and the footsteps of travellers and scholars. The relationship between town and gown is complex, at times cooperative, at times tense, but always intertwined. The university functions with a degree of self-governance. Scholars form guilds or universities, setting rules and standards for study, conduct and degrees. The awarding of a bachelor's or master's degree marks an important rite of passage, opening doors to teaching and clerical careers. You glimpse a lecture on Aristotle's physics, the professor drawing connections between ancient philosophy and contemporary questions about the natural world. The thirst for knowledge here is insatiable, as scholars seek to reconcile faith with reason and tradition with innovation. As dusk settles, the flicker of candlelight spills from windows onto the cobblestones, and the soft murmur of conversation fills the air. The university is a living, breathing community, an incubator for ideas that will shape Europe's intellectual future. Your journey will soon take you further east, to the Buddhist academies of Tibet and the evolving centres of learning in the Mongol Empire, where education blends spiritual discipline with cultural exchange on a vast scale. From the bustling streets of Oxford, your journey shifts dramatically eastward across vast steppes and rugged mountains, until you find yourself in the serene and spiritual landscapes of Tibet during the 11th and 12th centuries. Here, education is deeply entwined with Buddhist practice, as monastic universities, or shedras, serve as both religious sanctuaries and intellectual centres. You enter a sprawling monastery perched high in the Himalayas, its whitewashed walls glowing softly under the crisp mountain air. Prayer flags flutter gently in the wind, carrying silent blessings across the valleys. The scent of burning juniper and incense fills the halls, mingling with the quiet murmur of monks chanting sacred texts. Inside a large teaching hall, rows of monks sit cross-legged on cushions, their robes of vibrant maroon against the stone floor. A senior lama speaks calmly, guiding his students through complex texts on Buddhist philosophy, logic and metaphysics. The language of instruction is classical Tibetan, rich and melodic, weaving deep spiritual teachings with rigorous debate. Here, education is a blend of meditation and scholastic inquiry. Students engage in animated debate, clapping hands and gesturing to challenge and clarify each other's understanding. This practice sharpens both intellect and concentration, seen as essential to spiritual enlightenment. The curriculum spans sacred scriptures, logic, poetry, and medicine. Monks learn to read and interpret Indian Buddhist texts, integrating them with native traditions. Manuscripts carefully copied by hand preserve a wealth of knowledge about philosophy, ethics, and the natural world. The daily rhythm balances study with ritual, prayer, meditation, and chanting. Frame long hours of learning. Monastic discipline is strict yet compassionate, cultivating humility and wisdom in equal measure. Beyond the monastery walls, the landscape is rugged and beautiful. Snow-capped peaks, rushing rivers, and sparse villages where lay people support the monastic community. Education here is not simply academic. It is a path toward personal transformation and service to others. You feel the profound sense of purpose permeating the place, a harmony of mind, body and spirit that defines Tibetan scholastic tradition. This ancient system will influence Buddhist thought across Asia for centuries. As the sun sets behind the mountains, casting long shadows over prayer wheels and stupas, you prepare to continue your journey to other centres of learning where spiritual and secular knowledge meet in fascinating ways. From the high monasteries of Tibet, your path winds down through the vast Eurasian steppe toward the sprawling and diverse territories of the Mongol Empire in the 13th century, where education takes on new forms amid rapid cultural exchanges and political upheaval. Here, amidst the nomadic traditions and burgeoning cities, centres of learning become meeting points of different civilizations: Chinese, Persian, Turkic, and more. You arrive in the imperial capital of Karakoram, a city both wild and vibrant, built along the Orkhon River. The air is filled with the mingled scents of horses, spices, wood smoke, and distant markets alive with traders from far-flung lands. Tent cities blend with more permanent stone and timber structures, reflecting the empire's hybrid nature, part nomadic, part settled. In a courtyard framed by wooden columns and colourful banners, scholars from many cultures gather. Among them are Muslim jurists, Buddhist monks, Confucian scholars, and Christian priests, each sharing knowledge and translating texts. The Mongol rulers, though warriors by tradition, patronise this intellectual diversity, encouraging the flow of ideas as a means to govern a vast multicultural realm. You observe lessons in different languages: Arabic, Persian, Mongolian, and Chinese, where students study everything from astronomy and medicine to law and history. Libraries, though not yet centralised universities, hold manuscripts collected from the far reaches of the empire, treasures carried along the Silk Road. Education here is fluid and practical, often oriented toward administration and diplomacy. The Mongol elite seek scribes and advisors skilled in languages and customs, capable of managing distant provinces and diverse peoples. Yet spiritual learning also thrives, as monasteries and temples serve as centres for Buddhist, Muslim and Christian teachings. The atmosphere is dynamic but fragile. The empire is vast and often unstable, its centres of learning subject to the tides of conquest and alliance. Still, the mingling of cultures fosters innovations in science, cartography and literature that will echo through history. Outside the learning spaces, the city hums with the rhythms of nomadic life and urban bustle. Horses being tended, markets trading silk and salt, diplomats negotiating with a mix of ceremony and urgency. As dusk falls over Karakoram, you stand watching the smoke from cooking fires rise into a violet sky, feeling the pulse of an empire where knowledge and power move hand in hand, shaping a world at the crossroads of tradition and transformation. Your journey will next turn to the Confucian academies of Song Dynasty China, where education is deeply institutionalized and tied to the civil service. From the vibrant crossroads of the Mongol Empire, your journey carries you southeast to the refined and bustling world of Song Dynasty China in the 11th and 12th centuries, where education has become a deeply institutionalized and essential part of governance and culture. You find yourself in the capital city of Kaifeng, a sprawling metropolis alive with scholars, merchants, artisans and officials. The air is thick with the mingling scents of ink, paper, freshly brewed tea and the distant aroma of street food vendors. The city hums with activity, from the clatter of horse-drawn carts on stone streets to the quiet rustle of scrolls in the academies. Education here is inseparable from the state, a pathway to civil service and social prestige. You enter a Confucian academy, a serene compound shaded by ancient trees and lined with wooden halls adorned with calligraphy. Students, dressed in simple robes, sit cross-legged on mats, listening attentively as a master recites passages from the Analects of Confucius. The tone is measured, deliberate, emphasizing moral cultivation, filial piety and social harmony. The curriculum revolves around the 4 books and 5 classics, texts that embody centuries of Chinese philosophical and literary tradition. Students labour to memorize, interpret and write essays on these works, preparing for the imperial examinations, the rigorous tests that determine entry into the civil bureaucracy. Education is exacting and competitive. Study begins early in the morning and continues through the day, punctuated by calligraphy practice and lessons in poetry, history and classical Chinese literature. The ability to write elegant prose and poetry is prized alongside mastery of Confucian ideals. The imperial examination system is a defining feature of Song education, a meritocratic yet grueling process that shapes social mobility. Success means a prestigious government post. Failure often returns the student to a quiet scholarly life or family estate. You glimpse heated debates among scholars, some advocating adherence to tradition, others pushing for reform and adaptation to changing times. The tension between conservatism and innovation breathes life into the academies and the larger intellectual landscape. Outside the academy walls, Kaifeng is a city of contrasts: serene gardens and bustling markets, scholarly study and vibrant festivals. The Song dynasty's emphasis on printing technology means texts are more widely available, spreading knowledge beyond elite circles. Education here is a lifelong pursuit, a way of shaping not just individuals but society itself. It is deeply tied to Confucian ideals of order, ethics, and responsibility, echoing through the vast bureaucracy that governs an empire of millions. As twilight descends, lanterns are lit along the streets, casting a warm glow on paper windows and lacquered rooftops. The city slows but never truly sleeps, its pulse carried on the steady rhythms of study, governance, and daily life. Your journey will soon lead you westward again, to the madrasas of the Islamic world, centres of learning that blend faith, philosophy, and science in profound ways. From the orderly gardens and lantern-lit streets of Song China, your journey now takes you westward across deserts and mountains to the thriving cities of the Islamic Golden Age, particularly in the 11th and 12th centuries. You arrive in the ancient city of Baghdad, once the jewel of the Abbasid Caliphate, where education flourishes in madrasas, institutions that combine religious devotion with scientific inquiry and philosophical debate. The air is warm and fragrant with spices and incense, the marketplace alive with merchants selling silk, leather, and books. You walk through narrow alleyways lined with libraries and schools, their walls covered with intricate geometric patterns and calligraphy. The madrasas here serve as centres not only for Islamic law and theology but also for mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and literature. Inside a spacious lecture hall, students gather on cushions as a learned teacher reads from a thick manuscript of Avicenna's Canon of Medicine. The teacher's voice is calm and steady, explaining complex concepts in anatomy and herbal remedies, while students listen intently, occasionally asking questions. The tradition of medical study here is rigorous, combining empirical observation with classical texts from Hippocrates, Galen, and original Arab scholarship. In another room, scholars debate philosophy and theology, weaving together ideas from Aristotle, Plato, and Islamic thinkers like Al-Farabi and Al-Ghazali. The madrasas encourage both faith and reason, fostering an environment where questioning and exploration are welcomed within the bounds of religious orthodoxy. The curriculum is diverse, reflecting the multifaceted nature of Islamic education. Students study fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, hadith, sayings of the Prophet, as well as mathematics, algebra and geometry in particular, and astronomy, crucial for prayer times and navigation. Libraries hold vast collections of manuscripts, some painstakingly copied by hand, others printed using early forms of block printing. Life around the madrasa is lively but disciplined. You see students reading in courtyards shaded by orange trees, copying texts by candlelight, and attending public lectures. The city's intellectual life pulses with energy, attracting scholars from across the Muslim world and beyond, from Spain to Central Asia. The madrasas are more than just schools. They are hubs of cultural exchange and innovation. Here, knowledge is a bridge connecting different traditions and laying the foundations for future developments in science and philosophy. As night falls over Baghdad, lanterns cast a warm glow on tiled courtyards and bustling bazaars. The call to prayer echoes softly through the city, a reminder of faith's central role in daily life and study. Your journey will soon return to Europe, to explore the blossoming universities of Paris and their role in shaping medieval scholasticism. Leaving behind the warm lantern-lit streets of Baghdad, your journey takes you back westward to the heart of medieval Europe, to the burgeoning University of Paris in the 12th and 13th centuries. This institution stands as one of the earliest and most influential universities of the medieval world, known as the Sorbonne in later years, and it becomes a beacon for scholars from across the continent seeking knowledge and spiritual truth. You arrive in Paris during a cool spring morning, the Seine flowing quietly beneath stone bridges, its waters reflecting the soaring spires of Notre Dame Cathedral. The city is alive with the sounds of bells, merchants calling their wares, and the murmur of voices in Latin spilling from lecture halls and cloisters. The university itself lacks a single campus. Instead, it is woven into the fabric of the city, with students and masters occupying rented rooms and halls throughout the bustling streets. Inside a crowded classroom, students sit on wooden benches, their robes simple but worn, as a master reads from the works of Aristotle, recently reintroduced to Western Europe through translations from Arabic and Greek. This revival of Aristotelian philosophy energizes the scholastic method, a style of learning based on dialectical reasoning and debate. The curriculum here is structured around the trivium and quadrivium, but also includes theology, law, and medicine, fields that demand mastery for both ecclesiastical and civic careers. Theological study, however, reigns supreme, with figures like Thomas Aquinas soon to shape Christian thought by blending faith and reason. Students participate actively in disputations, where they challenge each other and their masters to defend or refute propositions, sharpening their intellects and rhetoric. The atmosphere is rigorous, demanding, and at times contentious, but it fosters a vibrant culture of inquiry. The university operates under the authority of the church, but enjoys a degree of self-governance, with scholars forming guilds that protect their rights and regulate teaching standards. Conflicts sometimes arise between students and townsfolk, reflecting tensions between the academic community and urban life. Beyond lectures, you observe students in the cloisters, copying manuscripts or walking through gardens discussing philosophy and poetry. The university's libraries grow, holding manuscripts painstakingly copied by hand, precious treasures for scholars who pore over their contents late into the night. Paris itself is a city of contrasts, markets and cathedrals, scholars and artisans, poverty and wealth. Education here becomes not only a path to knowledge, but a powerful force in shaping medieval European culture, politics, and religion. As the sun sets behind the cathedral towers, you feel the pulse of a world where learning is a sacred and social pursuit, where the quest for truth unfolds amid stone streets and candlelit rooms. Your journey will soon explore the university traditions of Italy and the influence of Renaissance humanism in later centuries. From the cobblestone streets of Paris, your journey moves southward to the city of Bologna in northern Italy, where, by the late 12th century, the first truly autonomous university is born, a place dedicated especially to the study of law. Unlike earlier cathedral schools, Bologna's university emerges as a self-governing community of students and masters, setting new precedents for academic freedom and structure. You find yourself standing beneath the shadow of medieval towers that rise above the city, the warm Italian sun bathing narrow streets in golden light. The scent of freshly baked bread mingles with the aroma of leather-bound manuscripts, and the chatter of students flows from crowded inns and lecture halls. Bologna's university is less clerical than Paris, attracting a diverse body of students, including many from across Europe who come to study Roman and canon law, the foundational systems governing both secular and ecclesiastical life. The Corpus Juris Civilis, rediscovered centuries earlier, forms the core of study, as students learn to interpret and argue complex legal codes. In a vaulted hall with arched windows, you observe a professor reading aloud, his voice steady and deliberate. Around him, students listen intently, taking notes on parchment, readying themselves for oral disputations that test their understanding and rhetorical skill. The university's structure is unique. Students organize into nations based on their regions of origin and hold significant power over the governance of the institution, including hiring and dismissing masters. This autonomy fosters a vibrant academic culture, but also occasional conflicts between student factions. Outside the classroom, Bologna's lively streets teem with merchants, artists, and travellers, while inns serve as gathering places for students who exchange ideas over meals and wine. The university's independence from church control allows it to flourish as a centre for secular learning, influencing future universities across Europe. Beyond law, the city supports studies in medicine, philosophy, and the arts, although law remains paramount. The emphasis on critical thinking and debate here shapes not only legal minds, but also broader intellectual currents that ripple throughout medieval society. You can almost hear the echoes of student debates drifting through the arches, feel the pulse of youthful energy combined with rigorous discipline, a blend that propels education beyond its religious origins into new realms. As evening falls, the glow from torches and lanterns spills onto cobblestones, and the city quiets, holding the promise of another day filled with learning, argument, and discovery. Your journey will next explore how similar academic communities take shape in the Islamic world, especially in cities like Cairo and Cordoba, before returning to East Asia for a glimpse of later educational reforms. From the lively streets of Bologna, your path returns to the vast and diverse Islamic world, this time leading you to the bustling metropolis of Cairo in the 12th century under the Fatimid Caliphate. Here, education thrives in the Al-Azhar Mosque, a madrasa that grows beyond a place of worship into one of the world's earliest universities, blending religious instruction with secular knowledge. Walking through the grand courtyard of Al-Azhar, you feel the warmth of the sun and hear the soft calls to prayer echoing against intricately carved stone walls. Scholars and students from across North Africa, the Middle East and beyond gather here, exchanging ideas in Arabic, Persian and other tongues. The atmosphere is alive with quiet discussion, the turning of pages and the scratch of reed pens on parchment. Inside lecture halls shaded by wooden screens, you observe students learning fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, under the guidance of seasoned muftis who interpret sacred law with nuance and care. But alongside religious studies, you also see lessons in philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, and grammar, reflecting a broad curriculum aimed at cultivating both faith and reason. Al-Azhar's approach to education is holistic, valuing memorization and mastery of texts, but also critical engagement and debate. Students are encouraged to question and analyze, drawing on a rich tradition that connects Islamic scholarship to earlier Greek, Persian, and Indian knowledge. Outside the classroom, the university's vast library houses countless manuscripts, scientific treatises, poetic anthologies, theological commentaries, many painstakingly copied by hand. The intellectual life here is vibrant, supported by patrons who understand the power of knowledge to strengthen faith in society. The madrasa functions as both a religious institution and a civic centre, playing a vital role in shaping Egypt's culture and governance. Scholars often serve as judges, teachers, and advisors, their education a bridge between divine law and everyday life. As the sun dips below minarets and domes, the call to prayer resounds again, blending with the sounds of the city settling into evening. Lanterns flicker in courtyards, and the hum of conversation softens, but the pursuit of knowledge continues quietly into the night. From here, your journey will explore the flourishing educational centres of Al-Andalus in Spain, where Islamic, Christian and Jewish scholars coexisted and exchanged ideas in a unique cultural mosaic. From the warm streets of Cairo, your journey now carries you westward across the Mediterranean to the Iberian Peninsula, to the remarkable city of Cordoba in Al-Andalus during the 10th and 11th centuries, a golden age of learning where Islamic, Christian and Jewish traditions intertwine in vibrant coexistence. Cordoba, once the capital of the Umayyad Caliphate in Spain, is a dazzling metropolis famed for its grand mosques, palaces, and especially its centres of education and culture. Walking through the city's bustling bazaars, you feel the hum of a diverse population, merchants in fine silks, philosophers debating in courtyards, poets reciting verses beneath orange trees. The scent of jasmine mingles with the aroma of spices and freshly baked bread. Education here thrives in madrasas, libraries and private study circles, places where ideas from across the ancient world converge. In a cool, shaded room within a madrasa, you witness a scholar lecturing on the works of Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina, Avicenna, while students eagerly take notes. The curriculum is wide-ranging. Philosophy, theology, medicine, mathematics and astronomy are studied alongside religious law and ethics. Arabic is the lingua franca of learning, but many also speak Latin, Hebrew, and the local Romance languages, reflecting the city's multicultural fabric. Cordoba's libraries are legendary, holding tens of thousands of manuscripts that include translations of Greek classics and original works by Muslim, Christian and Jewish scholars. The exchange of knowledge here is unparalleled. Jewish poets write Arabic poetry, Christian thinkers absorb Islamic philosophy, and Muslim physicians develop new medical techniques, all enriching the intellectual climate. Education is both formal and informal. Besides structured lessons in madrasas, many scholars maintain halakat, study circles where knowledge is shared and debated in more intimate settings. This encourages a spirit of inquiry and dialogue rare for the era. The city's tolerance and curiosity foster a vibrant atmosphere where the boundaries between religion and science, faith and reason, are explored rather than rigidly enforced. Scholars like Maimonides, a Jewish philosopher and physician, emerge from this milieu, exemplifying the era's intellectual cross-pollination. As dusk settles over Cordoba's gleaming minarets and bell towers, the city's lights twinkle in the evening breeze. You feel the pulse of a place where education is a bridge between cultures, a shared journey toward understanding in a world rich with complexity. Your journey will soon return eastward, back to China, where Confucian academies continue to evolve in the centuries to come, shaping education for generations. Leaving behind the vibrant mosaic of Cordoba, your journey turns once more to East Asia, this time to the Song dynasty's later years, as Confucian academies continue their steady evolution through the 12th and 13th centuries. These academies, known as Shuyuan, begin to grow beyond simple teaching halls into influential cultural institutions, shaping not only education, but also politics and philosophy across China. You find yourself walking a winding path through misty hills, arriving at a serene academy nestled among ancient pines and flowing streams. The wooden buildings, adorned with calligraphy scrolls and simple red lanterns, exude a quiet dignity. Students, some as young as 10 and others much older, sit attentively, reciting verses from the four books and discussing the teachings of Zhu Xi, the great Neo-Confucian philosopher who revitalized Confucian thought by synthesizing ethics, metaphysics, and practical governance. The atmosphere here is contemplative yet lively, a blend of rigorous discipline and philosophical inquiry. Lessons focus on moral self-cultivation, social harmony, and the role of the scholar in society, ideas that ripple through government and everyday life. You witness debates that stretch into the evening, where students challenge each other on interpretations of virtue and the nature of the cosmos. Beyond text and debate, the academies emphasize poetry, calligraphy, and the arts, encouraging a holistic education that nurtures both mind and character. The natural surroundings, bamboo groves, flowing streams, and quiet gardens, offer spaces for meditation and reflection, essential elements of the learning experience. As you walk among the students, you notice their humble robes and earnest expressions. Many come from farming families, hoping that education will open doors to civil service and improve not only their lives but those of their communities. Success in the rigorous imperial exams remains the ultimate goal, but here, education is also a lifelong journey of self-improvement and service. The influence of these academies extends far beyond their walls. Their graduates become officials, poets, and thinkers who shape the policies and culture of the empire. The Confucian ideal of education as a moral and social duty continues to define the landscape of learning in East Asia for centuries. As twilight deepens, lanterns glow softly, and the sounds of distant bells and flowing water create a gentle backdrop. You feel the weight and grace of a tradition that bridges past and future through quiet dedication to knowledge and virtue. Your journey will soon conclude, reflecting on the enduring legacies of these diverse medieval educational traditions and their surprising connections across the world. As your journey draws to a close, you sit quietly and reflect on the many paths of learning you have travelled. Across monasteries and madrasas, Confucian academies and medieval universities, vibrant cities and quiet cloisters. Each place, each culture, has shaped education in its own unique way, yet a common thread weaves through them all: the pursuit of knowledge as a means to understand the world and one's place within it. You think back to the monastic schools of Europe, where chants and scriptures laid the foundation for Western learning, the flickering candlelight revealing humble scribes copying texts with reverence. Then to the Islamic madrasas, alive with the blending of faith and reason, where scholars debated Aristotle and charted the stars, bridging ancient knowledge with new discoveries. You recall the Confucian academies in China, steeped in moral philosophy, and the belief that education was a lifelong path toward virtue and social harmony. The medieval universities of Europe, born in cities like Paris and Bologna, stand out as hubs of intellectual rigour and debate, places where scholasticism pushed the boundaries of theology and philosophy. And in Al-Andalus, the interweaving of cultures created a vibrant tapestry of learning, where faiths coexisted and ideas flowed freely, enriching all who lived there. Despite the differences in language, religion, and custom, each tradition carried a profound respect for learning, not simply as a means to an end, but as a transformative journey. Education was a bridge between generations, a dialogue across centuries, a shared human endeavour to seek meaning and mastery. In this quiet moment, you realise that the echoes of these medieval schools still resonate today, in the classrooms, libraries and digital spaces where knowledge continues to grow and evolve. You breathe deeply, feeling the calm continuity of this ancient quest. The world of 1,000 years ago might seem distant, but its spirit lives on, in the scholar's question, the teacher's patience, and the learner's quiet determination. Your journey through the history of medieval education ends here, but the story of learning is forever unfolding. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through what school was really like 1,000 years ago. I hope you found it both calming and fascinating to travel through these ancient halls of learning across different cultures and continents. Now, as you settle in for the night, get cosy and let your mind drift gently through the echoes of history. May your sleep be peaceful and deep, filled with restful dreams that carry you far and wide. Good night, and I'll see you next time.